Live for the clan. That's what my father always said. Cyan Vert remembered these words as he knelt in the midst of a chaotic battlefield. Blood dripped down his face, mingling with the grime and sweat of combat. His father's words echoed in his mind, reminding him of his duty, to desire nothing, to remain a shadow by his brother's side. Yet here he was, alone against the continent's strongest commanders. He sat on his knees, surrounded by the fallen bodies of knights, both friend and foe. A group of knights, still standing, watched him with a mix of awe and caution. One of them remarked in disbelief about how a single knight had managed to fend off their most formidable commanders. Among them, a commander stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Cyan. Cyan Vert, the commander called, his voice carrying a mixture of disdain and curiosity. Cyan lifted his head, meeting the commander's gaze. Boris, he responded, recognizing the man who had orchestrated this bloodshed. A smug look spread across Boris's face. You've put up quite a fight, Cyan. But it's over now. From thin air, Cyan drew his sword, the blade gleaming ominously despite the chaos around them. Who made you do this to me, Boris? Was it the Emperor, he demanded, an ominous aura beginning to envelop his body. Boris shielded his face with his arm, grimacing at the dark fog emanating from Cyan. That black fog of yours is sickening, he spat. The rumors were true. You are an assassin from Mist. Mist, the clandestine organization, elusive and deadly as fog, feared by the Knights of Light. Boris's voice dripped with contempt as he continued, I'll report to the higher-ups that I've eliminated an impure being affiliated with the heathens. Cyan's eyes narrowed. You can make your report when you still have a mouth to speak with, he retorted. I promise you, you won't have a single tooth left after this. Boris sneered. If you plan to use your secret power, give up now. There's a 9-star magic barrier cast around this area. Inwardly, Cyan knew he needed to escape, to reveal the true culprit behind this treachery to his brother. But there was no room for doubt. His fierce eyes locked onto Boris. Hell just pierced through your barrier, he declared. Before the clash could escalate, a commanding voice rang out. Stop! Both men turned to see a figure clad in golden armor approaching. Cyan's eyes widened in surprise and confusion. He recognized the man, a reputable warrior whose presence demanded respect. Live for the clan, his father had always said. And by extension, his brother Ashel was the clan. Ashel Vert's success was Cyan's success. The man in golden armor had blonde hair and stared at Cyan. Realization dawned upon Cyan, Ashel was behind it all. This revelation made his legs weak. Ashel, the man in golden armor, commented, Cyan, you seem confused now that I'm here. Cyan looked at him, desperation in his eyes. What is the meaning of this, Ashel? Ashel's expression softened slightly. You've carried out your duties well, Cyan. For the clan. For the people. And for me. Cyan's heart sank as he understood what was coming. I don't understand. Have I done something wrong? Wrong? Ashel echoed, his voice hardening. Look at that ominous fog you emit. You're nothing more than a murderer. Can you even still be called human? Cyan's mind reeled. The words murderer and sin echoed in his head. He had helped Ashel through countless trials, the succession fight within the Empire, the Demon King army's raid, the war to unify the continent. He had served his brother, lived for his brother. Fury overtook him, and he punched the ground. Slowly, Cyan stood up, dark aura oozing from his body. Driven by rage, his fog grew more intense. Blood pooled at his feet, but he didn't care if his body broke down. He would give everything he had now, if it meant destroying Ashel. Crimson mist covered the whole area, painting the sky red. The knights watched in shock at the sheer amount of mana Cyan still possessed. It was impossible for a human. The hero is trying to kill his younger brother out of fear, Cyan narrated, his voice filled with anger. Aren't you ashamed of yourself, Ashel? Ashel's face contorted with fury, veins visible. Cyan launched at him with incredible speed, attacking relentlessly. Ashel deflected with his sword, but Cyan only needed one chance to stab Ashel's weak point and stop his regeneration. Their fight continued, Cyan's attack meeting a magic barrier. He hadn't expected his strongest blow to be blocked. Glancing around, he saw Boris assisting Ashel, reinforcing the barrier. You're a poor bastard, Ashel sneered, suddenly driving his sword into Cyan's stomach. Cyan gasped, dropping his dagger as pain surged through him. I wanted to give you a painless death, Cyan. Because you're my brother. But now you've shown your true colors. Cyan's expression revealed his heartbreak at Ashel's words. Ashel twisted the sword and kicked him, pulling the blade free and leaving Cyan lying on the ground. Blood pooled beneath him as Ashel walked away, leaving him to his fate. Cyan's mind raced as he lay there, blood pooling around him. Was this his end? He pondered the foolishness of his life, calling himself stupid. But as consciousness began to slip away, a surge of determination flared within him. He would not die here. Not like this. With a guttural scream, Cyan forced himself to his feet and chased after Ashel. His brother sensed the movement and turned just in time to see Cyan's dagger inches from his throat. Cyan released all his remaining power in that single, desperate attack. But before the blade could strike, a powerful force blew him away. He lost consciousness. A voice pierced through the darkness. "Young Master Cyan." Cyan's eyes snapped open. He was drenched in sweat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. A maid stood before him, scolding him for oversleeping. "Get your act together, Cyan. You need to get ready," she chided. He blinked in surprise. "Emily? What are you doing here?" Emily looked equally surprised. Cyan's mind raced as he realized something. It had been 20 years since he last saw her, yet she looked exactly the same. His surroundings, too, were familiar. It was the room he had lived in as a child, unchanged. Emily called his name again, snapping him out of his reverie. "Are you stalling because you don't want to go to training? Make up your mind and get going." Cyan, bewildered, asked, "What training?" In the Vert clan duchy, Cyan looked around, certain he had been transported back to his past. Was this what people meant when they said your life flashes before your eyes before death? He remembered the year, 985 Marchinist, 27 years ago. It was a year before he entered the academy. Every year, the duchy held a dual training session, a significant event attended by his father, Duke Vert. His opponent was Krantz Vert, his half-brother, the same age as Cyan. Krantz's mother, Margaret Ezra, was the duke's wife. As Cyan prepared for the training session, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending fate. He had a second chance, a chance to change everything. And this time, he would not let betrayal define his life. Despite being one of the youngest, Krantz Vert, Cyan's half-brother, received all the attention. Cyan was considered a bastard son, and after being mocked in their duel, he became the laughingstock of the duchy. The duel's outcome led to their father ignoring Cyan, turning him into an outcast within his own family. As the duel began, Emily, the loyal maid, whispered to Cyan, suggesting he should surrender. Young Cyan, determined and resolute, assured her it was okay. He just needed to win. In his mind, her suggestion felt like a condescending look down on him. Gripping his weapon, a rapier, Cyan noticed it felt heavy. He realized his strength was the same as when he was at that age. The sensation was not like a dream or a memory flashing before his eyes, it felt real. He had never heard of a magic spell capable of creating such strong illusions. He wondered if he had truly been sent back to the past. Krantz sneered, "So, you didn't run off from the duel after all." Cyan thought to himself that this could be his chance to change the future. He looked at his father, Duke Vert, who declared the start of the match. Krantz attacked first, confident that he would hit his mark. "Where are you looking, Cyan?" Krantz taunted as he lunged forward. Cyan stood his ground, observing his brother. To him, Krantz moved like a snail. He shifted his stance slightly, and Krantz missed, stumbling past him. Infuriated, Krantz accused Cyan of dodging like a coward. Before Krantz could react further, Cyan struck his hand, sending Krantz's sword flying. With a swift kick to the shin, Krantz fell to the ground, groaning in pain and clutching his knees. Margaret Ezra, Krantz's mother, cried out in worry. Cyan knew that if he placed his sword at Krantz's throat, the duel would be over. But he gripped his sword tightly, recalling how Krantz had bullied him mercilessly, even at the academy. He decided he needed to make sure Krantz could never do anything like that again. Krantz, now terrified with tears streaming down his face, lay in pain. The duel ended with Krantz's loss. The Duke ordered Cyan to see him, freeing up his schedule for this meeting. Cyan pondered if his victory was really that impressive. A high-class knight named Jokin, directly affiliated with the Duke, escorted him. As they walked through the hallway, they encountered Margaret Ezra. It was clear she had spoken to the Duke about her son. Cyan grinned when he saw the look on her face, as if she had stepped in something foul. "Is Krantz okay?" Cyan asked, feigning concern. Margaret's fury was palpable. "You dare ask such a question after beating your brother like that? You're thick-skinned, Cyan. That's how duels are," Cyan said. She brushed past him, muttering, "This is why bastards shouldn't be treated like legitimate children." With a devilish grin, Margaret continued, "Like mother, like son. Your mother is a dirty whore. You should be on the streets begging for food instead of daring to put up a fight." Cyan's eyes narrowed with murderous intent. She had crossed the line. He pondered if he should kill her right there but restrained himself. Instead, a grin flashed across his face. He knew how to make her suffer slowly, painstakingly slowly. "Are you aware that I'm going to the academy with Krantz?" he asked. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "What's your point?" I'm sure you want your son to graduate with all his limbs, right? Or maybe you're not that worried about him. Ha, Duchess. Her rage boiled over. She raised her hand to slap him, calling him a vulgar piece of filth, but Jokin's arm blocked her. Jokin apologized to the Duchess, explaining that the Duke had urgently summoned Cyan. With a stern expression, he told the Duchess they had to leave. The Duchess remained silent, for the Duke's orders were absolute. Cyan peeked from behind Jokin, laughing. He was protected by the guard knight, a knight who not wanted to submit even to the Duke's wife. Cyan thought of how nice and reliable Jokin was. The door to the Duke's chamber opened, and the Duke himself told them to come in. Cyan entered the room, his heart pounding. He greeted the Duke. In his mind, Cyan reflected on how it had been nearly 15 years since their last private meeting. Duke Willius Verth, the eminent feudal lord of Velius, a western province of the Ushif Empire, was known by many names, but the world revered him as the guardian of the continent. This title was earned through his heroic efforts to halt the demon invasions, utilizing his exceptional magical prowess and extraordinary intellect. Duke Willius carried this immense burden voluntarily, fighting valiantly until his demise in battle against the Demon King's army. His ultimate aspiration was the peace and prosperity of the entire continent. To Cyan, however, the Duke's legacy was painted differently. He saw Willius as a man who chose to live selflessly, dedicating his life to the service of others out of his own free will. In Cyan's eyes, this was foolish. The Duke had once remarked on Cyan's uncanny ability to follow the trajectory of a sword and evade it with precision, a talent that left Krantz perplexed. The Duke recounted a specific instance when Krantz had attacked, describing how Cyan had looked directly at the path of the swinging blade and deftly turned his body to avoid it. The Duke inquired about Cyan's training in swordsmanship, noting that Cyan had never shown an interest in it before. Cyan, as always, found the Duke's perceptiveness daunting. He confessed that he hadn't formally learned swordsmanship but had practiced secretly every night. The Duke, seeking more information, asked why Cyan had hidden such exceptional skills. Cyan, embarrassed, explained that he had wished to avoid attracting attention. Yet, the Duke was not satisfied with this answer, pointing out that despite his desire for anonymity, Cyan had exerted himself fully to defeat Krantz. The Duke then brought up Cyan's actions afterward, specifically mentioning how he had kicked Krantz while he was down. The question seemed probing, as if the Duke was trying to gauge Cyan's true capabilities. Cyan admitted that he had wanted to prove himself, to demonstrate that he was superior to Krantz despite their shared lineage. He asserted that this was the true purpose of the duel. The Duke, finding amusement in Cyan's candidness, praised him for his clear and composed response, which showcased his level-headedness and undiscovered talent. The Duke expressed his pleasure and foretold that Cyan would one day be a significant and dependable ally for Ashel. This prediction stirred a deep sense of betrayal within Cyan, rooted in his past life. He felt a wave of confusion and disappointment. Why should he be expected to support Ashel? It was always the same, the Duke's obsession with Ashel remained unwavering. Anger welled up inside Cyan, his hands clenching into fists. The Duke then offered a reward, asking Cyan if there was anything he desired. With a fierce resolve and sharp eyes, Cyan decided he would ruin everything Ashel had strived to achieve. He responded to the Duke with his request, determined to see his plans through. Moments later, Emily's face turned ashen upon learning of Cyan's intention to join the battlefront. Cyan attempted to reassure her, stating that nothing was set in stone yet. Emily, however, was incredulous and questioned his sanity, emphasizing the horrific nature of the place he wished to go. She reminded him that the region was infested with monstrous demonic creatures. Velias, the western province of the Ushif Empire, was known as the battlefront, with Lima Valley being the epicenter of this centuries-long conflict with demons. Due to the perilous nature of Lima Valley, Duke Willius Verth, who had always vehemently opposed such an idea, presented Cyan with a challenge. He must prove himself worthy of the battlefront within a month. The criteria for this worthiness remained unclear to Cyan, but he resolved to enhance his physical strength as much as possible in the given time. Though he acknowledged his current inferiority to his peers, he also recognized the advantage of retaining his combat instincts and the modest amount of magic he had detected within himself. He believed that with rigorous training, he could maximize his potential. Determined, Cyan began his training immediately. Suddenly, his door burst open, and a woman stormed in. It was Alice, her blue hair framing a stern expression. She seized him by the collar, shaking him vigorously. Emily, who had just greeted Lady Alice, watched as Alice confronted Cyan about his request to join the battlefront. Cyan's face went pale as he pleaded with Alice to release him. She complied, dropping him to the ground, leaving him feeling utterly drained. Alice remarked that defeating Krantz seemed to have inflated Cyan's ego. She then ordered him to follow her to the rooftop. Once on the rooftop, Alice laid out her conditions. She told him that if he could endure her attacks for 3 minutes, she would consent to him going to the battlefront. Cyan, bewildered, asked if such drastic measures were necessary. Alice, unwavering, demanded that he answer a single question: was he seeking the family title? Cyan was taken aback by her assumption, as he had no interest in such matters. His silence, however, was misinterpreted by Alice as confirmation. She instructed him to draw his sword. Cyan, feeling overwhelmed, realized that his day had been nothing short of chaotic, especially considering his recent duel with Krenz. Nonetheless, he prepared himself as Alice launched her assault. Cyan hadn't anticipated it, but he managed to deflect Alice's strike, a feat that stunned her. For a 10-year-old to block an attack of that caliber seemed improbable. Cyan pondered if Alice truly intended to unleash her full strength against her younger brother, who was 7 years her junior. Alice took a step back, processing what had just occurred. A rapier's blade was light and quick, yet Cyan had deftly parried her longsword. She questioned whether it was merely luck. She remarked that his intuition was sharper than she had expected. Seeing her expression, Cyan knew he was in trouble. Determined to test him further, Alice launched a barrage of ferocious attacks. She lunged at him with renewed intensity, but Cyan blocked her sword once more with his rapier. Not only that, he skillfully maneuvered his blade to position it parallel to her throat. Alice was momentarily taken aback. Cyan, straining under the effort, shifted his sword, but Alice retaliated, sending him flying. He landed atop a pillar, gasping for breath and contemplating how quickly things could turn dire. If he hadn't twisted his sword just right, he would have seriously injured her. His swordsmanship skill, thick fog, was designed for lethal efficiency. Cyan acknowledged the difficulty of fighting non-lethally given his current strength. He wondered how much time remained. He was compensating for his lack of power by imbuing his sword with mana, but his reserves were nearly depleted. Alice, also breathing heavily, invoked the elements of earth and wind to enhance her weapon. Cyan was astonished to witness her mastery of sixth-star magic. Alice's blade glowed with a blue aura, known as the Aqua Blade. With a mixture of desperation and determination, Cyan questioned if Alice intended to kill him. Her relentless muttering about not losing and the intensity in her eyes made it clear she was serious. Perched on the edge, Cyan foresaw disaster even if he managed to block her next attack. He decided to trust his instincts and hoped his plan would succeed. With a burst of speed, he charged at Alice. She was gathering power, her sword pointed skyward. Gripping his rapier tightly, Cyan silently prayed for intervention. As Alice's power surged, Cyan hoped for Yulkin's timely arrival. Just as Alice and Cyan were about to clash, Yulkin appeared, shouting, "Stop!" He intercepted Alice's blade with his own sword while grabbing Cyan by the back of his neck. The force of Alice's attack resulted in a massive explosion. Yulkin wore a stern expression as he addressed Lady Alice, chastising her for being too harsh on her much younger opponent. Cyan, still suspended from Yulkin's grasp, sighed in relief, having anxiously awaited Yulkin's arrival. As if snapping out of a trance, Alice gasped and immediately embraced her brother, apologizing profusely. She confessed that she must have momentarily lost her mind, tears and snot streaming down her face as she expressed her desperation to prevent him from going to the battlefield. Cyan smiled, thinking how typical it was of Alice to be so intense and passionate. She always put her heart into everything she did. Alice was the epitome of excellence, excelling in all subjects at the Royal Academy, where the most talented children gathered, whether in swordsmanship, magic, or academics. Her beauty was unparalleled, earning her the moniker, God's Child. From a young age, she had trained in swordsmanship and was regarded as a future guardian of the continent, along with their eldest brother, Ashelivert. Tragically, she was killed shortly after joining the Knights of Light. Cyan hugged her tightly, thinking of how much he had missed her. His embrace caught Alice's attention, and in his mind, he vowed to protect her this time. Alice then turned her attention to Yulkin, puzzled, and asked if he was the Duke's guardian knight. She was confused since the Duke had just left for the war. Yulkin explained that he was following the Duke's orders to protect the young master for a while. Although he was supposed to carry out this duty in secret, Cyan had sensed Yulkin's presence since leaving the Duke's office. Cyan wondered if Yulkin would have remained hidden if he hadn't noticed him. He also questioned why his father had instructed Yulkin to follow him secretly. Suddenly, Cyan felt groggy, and Alice caught him as he fell asleep, smiling and commenting on how he was still a little kid. The next day, Alice returned to the academy, having come back briefly to see their father before her graduation. Cyan, feeling the urgency to grow stronger, focused on strength training for the past 2 weeks, though 10 push-ups were his limit. He felt like he had hit a wall and knew he needed a new approach. Emily knocked on his door to inform him that a package had arrived. Cyan's excitement grew as Emily brought it in, complaining about the foul smell. It was the hellhound's blood he had requested, a rare item from Lima Valley that he had heard was available on the black market. The blood of demonic beasts was notorious for its poisonous smell and the burning sensation it caused upon consumption, but it was also rumored to permanently increase the consumer's mana and strength. Most dismissed this as mere myth, but Cyan knew from past experience that it was true. Emily asked if he was really going to drink it, and he confidently answered yes. In his mind, Emily need not worry, since he had survived her cooking before. He chugged down the blood, reminded of the first time he had tasted her mushroom soup, which had caused his heart to stop momentarily. Compared to that, the blood was nothing. He finished the entire drink, remarking on how surprisingly palatable it was. A surge of power coursed through his veins. Turning to Emily, he announced his intention to go for a walk, eager to test the effects. Cyan stepped outside, heading toward a mountain that overlooked the duchy. It had been some time since he last visited this place, a spot he frequented when he wanted solitude. He had been waiting for this moment for the past 2 weeks, a time when Yulkin was absent for his regular reports. The mountain was a place of peace for him, but today, it held a deeper significance. Ashel had once received a divine revelation from Lumendal, the god of light, about an ancient temple hidden in these mountains. Though skeptical, Ashel had discovered a spot where the flow of mana was concentrated. The revelation had not yet occurred, but Cyan was already aware of its existence. Cyan knelt, placing his hand on the ground. His power radiated through the earth, causing it to crack and reveal an underground passage. He grinned, relishing the thought that Ashel had no clue about his actions. Entering the passage, he noticed changes since his last visit. This was an ancient temple dedicated to Lumendal, erased from history following the demon wars 300 years ago. The temple's existence in the mountains behind the castle was a well-kept secret. Ahead of him lay a glowing sword on a pedestal. This was Duran Dark, a holy relic blessed by Lumendal. In 999 BFA, on August 12, humanity had driven the Demon King's army from Valias using ancient relics known as the God's Weaponry. Duran Dark had played a crucial role in their victory, and Cyan's future demise would be linked to this very sword, eventually wielded by a Shelvard. Cyan pondered if the sword had any connection to his regression. He reached out to touch Duran Dark, but as he anticipated, nothing happened. Frustrated, he kicked the pedestal, cursing the so-called holy sword. His mood soured, he mocked it, "Holy sword, my ass." He turned to leave, intent on completing his business elsewhere. Unbeknownst to him, the sword seemed to react to his disdain. As he walked past a beam of light, he felt an eerie presence. Shadows coalesced into a form, something otherworldly emerging from the depths. Cyan said, "Found it." At first glance, it appeared to be the shadow of a sword. However, it was far more than just a shadow. Cyan channeled his power into it, revealing a hidden pathway behind the altar of light. As he opened the door, he was greeted by the sight of his sword, glowing red atop a pedestal. "Nice to see you again," Cyan murmured to the sword. He grasped the hilt of Kyram, the demonic sword he had wielded before his death. As soon as he touched it, an ominous, powerful aura emanated from the blade. "Good morning, Kyram," he said, though the sword did not respond. Cyan wondered if it was still dormant. Despite this, he felt an exhilaration that made him want to test the blade's edge immediately. A shadow with sharp eyes materialized on the ground, asking Cyan if he felt no fear. Kyram's voice echoed, questioning if Cyan understood the implications of awakening it. Cyan shrugged, replying nonchalantly that he didn't care and that perhaps it meant the sword was now his. The shadow grew larger and more menacing, informing him that it was too late for regrets now that he had awakened a demonic sword. The shadow grinned, revealing rows of pointed teeth, and lunged at Cyan, claiming his body would belong to it. But Cyan, unperturbed, casually choked the shadow. "You weren't this pathetic before," he remarked. The shadow began to dissipate, revealing a human face. Kyram, astonished, wondered how Cyan could touch it. In response, Cyan reiterated that the sword was his. Kyram's long, pink, pointed nails slashed at Cyan as she screamed. He lost his grip, and Kyram leapt backward. When fully revealed, Kyram was a woman. She demanded to know who he was, noting the dark aura surrounding him. She asked if he was the successor. "Why do I sense Eru's aura from you?" Kyram demanded, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Cyan's grin widened, a devilish glint in his eyes. "You're right. I am Eru's successor," he declared confidently. "Your master is back, Kyram. Now, bow down." Kyram's expression hardened. "You're just a child. I refuse to accept this." A battle ensued. Cyan quickly realized that words alone wouldn't convince the demonic sword. He knew that Kairam's ultimate goal was to dominate the body of its wielder. With no other option, he decided to show his strength. Cyan's grin turned feral as he activated demonic sword control. Instantly, Kairam was pulled to the ground with a bone-jarring impact that made her groan. "I'll say this once," Cyan warned, his voice cold. "Why won't you accept me as your master while I'm still being nice?" Kairam gritted her teeth. "How can you wield that power?" she spat, defiance in her eyes. Cyan activated demonic sword control again, smashing her face into the ground repeatedly. Her head was soon buried deep in the earth. "Ready to accept me now?" Cyan asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "I accept," Kairam muttered, though she called him human. Cyan was about to activate demonic sword control again, but stopped when she hastily corrected herself, "Master." Satisfied, Cyan felt it was time to return. He had been gone too long. Kairam, now in her sword form, sighed contentedly. "It's been so long since I felt fresh air," she said, her voice echoing from the blade. She emerged from the sword, looking like a black balloon with eyes, a mouth, and pink hair. "This is refreshing," she exclaimed. "Master, what is your name?" "Cyan," he replied, giving his full name. "I've never heard that name before," Kairam commented, still skeptical. "Did Eru really choose a kid like you?" "In my past life, yes," Cyan answered, his expression serious. Kairam looked confused. "Past life?" "I died once before," Cyan explained. Kairam's eyes widened in disbelief. "What the hell?" she thought, and then she noticed something else. In front of them stood another sword, gleaming in the dim light. She remarked on how he was still sleeping, unaware of the events unfolding around him. Cyan mused aloud that the sword would have to wait 20 years for its rightful owner. Kairam, puzzled, pointed out that Cyan spoke as if he knew the future. Gripping his sword, Cyan adopted a combat stance. Without warning, he swiftly severed the handle of the sword before them. Kairam, taken aback, questioned his intentions. With a devilish grin, Cyan hinted that this might make future events more interesting. As the sun set, the carriage moved away from the castle, eventually slowing to a stop. Cyan, wearing a shield on his chest, reflected on how quickly time had passed. He greeted the Duke, who informed him that this would be the last time he would ask the question. The Duke inquired if Cyan was still resolved to go to the battlefront, offering him a chance to back out. Cyan, confident, affirmed his determination, stating that his heart was already set on the battlefront. The Duke then instructed Yulkin to reveal what he had. Holding a scroll, Yulkin unrolled it, and a fiery creature with sharp claws appeared, a hellhound, a demonic beast from the Lemia Valley. Cyan recognized the effort his father and the knights must have put into preparing this trial. The knights, ready to intervene if necessary, placed their hands on their swords. The Duke emphasized that Cyan was responsible for his actions and urged him to prove his resolve by passing the trial. Yulkin, gripping his sword tightly, remembered when Cyan had invited him for a duel. Cyan had explained that with only 3 days left until his promise to his father was due, he needed to experience a real fight. He asked Yulkin to help him, but Yulkin suggested he duel with someone his own age, like the young Master Krantz. Cyan explained that Krantz avoided him, leaving him no other choice. Reluctantly, Yulkin agreed but insisted he would only use his sword sheath and focus on defense, urging Cyan to attack freely. Cyan thanked him but made Yulkin promise not to tell the Duke about their duel, emphasizing it as an order. The seriousness in Cyan's expression puzzled Yulkin. Cyan attacked, and though Yulkin blocked it, he was astonished by the weight of the blow, especially from a 10-year-old. Before he could recover, Cyan attacked again, moving with surprising speed and disappearing from Yulkin's sight. He wondered where Cyan had vanished, then sensed him behind. Just in time, he managed to defend. Cyan launched a series of relentless attacks, taking the duel very seriously. Our protagonist, giving his all, found every strike deflected by Yulkin. Accepting his current limits, he acknowledged that he couldn't yet defeat Yulkin and thanked him for the effort. Yulkin, breathing heavily, praised the young master. Inwardly, he marveled at how much Cyan had grown from the weak boy he once knew. In the present, Yulkin's confidence in Cyan's potential was reaffirmed. The hellhound moved swiftly, its focus locked on Cyan. As it charged, Cyan anticipated its attack, understanding that with his current strength, he needed to end the battle swiftly. The hellhound prepared for another strike, but Cyan, having already planned his next move, assumed a combat stance. As it lunged, he leapt into the air and drove his sword into its skull. The knights were astonished, and the Duke looked pleased. Cyan surveyed the fallen hellhound, noting the blood spilling from its neck. He mused that such blood could fill several bottles but knew collecting it now would seem strange. The Duke clapped, commending Cyan for his impressive display and confirmed they would see each other at the battlefront. Cyan thanked his father. Kairam, a small wisp of smoke on his shoulder, appeared. She demanded if he saw her as a kitchen knife, to which Cyan, unperturbed, replied, "Of course not. You're a demonic sword. Why would you ask that?" Kairam retorted, urging him to use her, lamenting that she needed blood to gain strength. She eyed the hellhound's corpse, tongue out, begging for just a taste. Cyan assured her that he would soon use her to the fullest, telling her to anticipate it eagerly. Kairam grumbled that he should have woken her then. Soon, an ogre emerged to the northwest. The Duke commanded the knights to set up a defensive line and eliminate the threat immediately, instructing them to leave no one alive. The knights, responding with a shout, began the restraint of salvation. A glowing yellow symbol appeared in the air, illuminating the surroundings. A magic circle formed beneath the ogres, ensnaring them with restraints that immobilized the monstrous creatures. The Duke gave the command, and the knights charged, slicing through the ogres with precision. The air filled with the roars of the dying ogres, but the knights remained steadfast, fulfilling their duty with bravery and skill. The ogres fell swiftly under their blades. Cyan, seated on his horse, observed the scene with a calm demeanor. Behind him, Emily clung to the saddle, trembling and tearful. She asked the young master, her voice shaking, why he insisted on coming to such a dangerous place. Despite her distress, Cyan felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. The Duke approached and inquired how Cyan felt being on the front lines. Cyan confessed to feeling a bit nervous. The Duke nodded, sharing his wisdom. In a place like this, death could come at any moment. He advised Cyan to remain vigilant at all times. Cyan promised to keep that in mind, aware that unpredictability was a constant companion on the front lines. He understood the rhythm of life here, 3 to 4 battles a day, each with its own strategy and response plan. The knights, ever vigilant, formed a strong defense against the encroaching monsters. Cyan noted that his assigned group was stationed in the safest part of the camp, far from the front lines. The guards' discipline was impeccable, making it difficult for Cyan to find an opportunity to feed Karim. He resigned himself to waiting until dinner. Emily, still trembling, huddled under a blanket. She reminded Cyan of the Duke's warning. They never knew when or where they might die. Cyan, exasperated, asked why she didn't just leave if she was so afraid. Emily shot back, her voice loud and filled with frustration, pointing out that he couldn't manage without her. She made it clear that with monsters everywhere, she couldn't abandon him. With a sigh, she told him it was time to eat and instructed him to move. When Cyan inquired about the cake he had requested, Emily ignored him and left the tent. Cyan, holding back his irritation, wondered what would happen if he simply sent her away. Yet, he couldn't imagine doing so, despite how she treated him. Later that night, Cyan placed a doll that resembled him in his bed, covering it with a blanket to create the illusion that he was sleeping. Cyan adjusted his disguise, hoping it would be enough to avoid detection. Emily, still half asleep, asked if he was planning to exercise even here. He confirmed, asking if he had disturbed her. Her eyes remained closed as she praised his diligence, mentioning that the Duke would be proud of him. Donning his hood, Cyan informed her that he was heading out and requested her to handle things as usual. Before leaving the tent, he reiterated that she should act as if he were asleep. Aware of the heightened security on the front lines, Cyan sprinted away swiftly, knowing that his window of freedom was narrow. Utilizing his skill, Thick Fog, he invoked Fog's Descent, navigating through the camp based on memory until he reached an area teeming with monsters, an ideal setting to unleash Kairam. The demonic sword sensed the rich scent of blood, growing excited and urging Cyan to move quickly. Several hellhounds lunged at them, and Cyan, agreeing with Kairam, promised they would indulge. Together, they dispatched the monsters effortlessly, reveling in the ensuing bloodbath. Cyan activated Fog Sword, summoning Rushing Fog Storm, and cut through numerous creatures, moving like a whirlwind. After the skirmish, Cyan inserted a tube into a fallen monster's corpse, draining blood into a mug. Drinking the fresh blood, he looked almost deranged as he muttered, "This is the stuff." Kairam, too, felt invigorated, expressing her delight at feeling so refreshed. Cyan declared that they would continue training this way. Kairam questioned how long it would take to grow stronger by killing these creatures. Just then, more hellhounds approached from behind. Sensing them, Cyan reassured Kairam, promising a long night of hunting and plenty of monsters to slay. Kairam's excitement grew at the prospect of facing ogres, hellhounds, and giant crocodiles. Meanwhile, in the mountains, a carriage escorted by knights traveled cautiously. Inside, a girl with silver hair listened to a companion who worried about the dangers of the front lines. The woman suggested turning back, but the girl, revealing herself as the royal princess, insisted she was bound by duty to assist her father. Irritated, she reminded the woman not to treat her like a child and warned she would become angry if the topic was raised again. The woman acquiesced, then shifted the conversation, mentioning that the youngest son of the Vert family was also on the front lines. She noted that he was around the same age as the princess. Surprised, the princess asked why Duke Vert had brought his youngest son. Her attendant explained that the boy had volunteered. Suggesting that they might get along due to their similar ages, the attendant's idea was met with feigned disinterest from the princess, who then announced her intention to sleep. The attendant complied, but after a pause, the princess inquired about the boy's name. Cyan Vert, came the reply, which the princess repeated to herself, committing it to memory. The scene shifted to the princess's revealed face, marking her introduction as a significant character in the story. A monstrous creature was sliced to its demise. The Duke, concerned for his men, ordered an immediate check to ensure no one was injured. Reports soon confirmed that everyone was unharmed, much to his relief. He praised his soldiers for their hard work and ordered them to return to their duties. The Duke then surveyed the area. He had noted the individual who had felled the last flying beast, Cyan. Approaching him, the Duke inquired about Cyan's adjustment to the front lines. Cyan respectfully replied that he was learning new things every day, a response that surprised the Duke. He had expected his son to express a desire to return home quickly. Instead, he acknowledged that Cyan had endured much and expressed his pride in him. This unexpected praise caught Cyan off guard. Before departing, the Duke informed Cyan that he wished to discuss something important with him the next morning and asked him to visit his tent early. Cyan was taken aback by this uncharacteristic kindness from his father. As night fell, an eerie atmosphere settled over the camp. Suddenly, a monster with a long body emerged from the ground. Reacting quickly, Cyan managed to evade the creature. It was a deathworm, a gigantic beast with a tail end lined with sharp teeth, usually found deeper in the valley. Karam, observing the struggle, offered to take over, claiming her master might be in trouble. Cyan, however, was wary of her intentions, suspecting a hidden agenda. Karam denied any ulterior motives, promising to use the opportunity briefly before relinquishing control back to him. The deathworm's body exuded a faint smoke as it sustained shallow injuries, regenerating almost instantly. Karam pointed out the futility of attacking it superficially. Cyan realized that Karam was right, continuing like this would be pointless. It had already been a month since Cyan had joined the front lines, and despite having drunk the blood of countless demonic beasts, he still felt unsatisfied. The deathworm launched an attack, forcing Cyan to make a quick decision. He decided to play along with Karam's plan for the time being. Karam, eager to unleash her powers, activated the 9th form of her demonic sword manifestation, creating a thick fog. She aimed to tear through the deathworm's tough skin with a swift move, inflicting several deep wounds. Blood gushed from the deathworm, and Karam followed up with her next skill, the fog sword, 8 fluttering petals. Moving swiftly along the creature's body, she sliced it repeatedly, weakening it further. Blood sprayed the area as the deathworm's strength waned, and eventually, its body was severed into pieces. Meanwhile, the Duke's party came across a recently slain monster. Jokin noted the imposing mana surrounding the corpse and suspected it might be the work of a demon. The Duke, not willing to overlook the presence of a demon, ordered a thorough inspection of the area and immediate incineration of the corpse. Upon closer inspection, the Duke recognized the familiar traces of the sword. He felt a sense of déjà vu but was soon called by Elkin to inspect another site. Jokin raised his torch to reveal the corpse of a deathworm. The Duke, astonished, wondered who could have slain such a beast. He suspected it might be the work of an organization he knew of. Cyan, regaining control of his body, realized that allowing Karam to take over, even momentarily, had been a risky decision. Demonic sword manifestation allowed Karam to utilize her true powers but also gave her the potential to fully control Cyan if he let his guard down. He woke up the feeling sore all over, a stark reminder of the previous night's battle. Cyan thought it was fortunate that he had consumed all that demonic beast blood. If this had happened a month ago, his body would have collapsed under the strain. Suddenly, Kairam spoke up, claiming she had figured everything out. Cyan was puzzled, unable to follow her meaning. She elaborated, noting that while Cyan outwardly appeared to be a child, his behavior and speech were far from childish. Kairam observed that his proficiency in handling her was too advanced for a first-timer. Additionally, he possessed an intimate knowledge of the Lima Valley's geography and wielded sword techniques resembling those honed over 30 years. Moreover, Cyan had mentioned that he had already died once. This led Kairam to conclude that he was a regressor. Cyan looked at her incredulously and asked if it wasn't obvious when he said he had died before. He thought he had made it clear enough. Kairam was taken aback and then angered, exclaiming that he hadn't explained anything. Cyan nonchalantly replied that he was too lazy to elaborate. Switching topics, Kairam remarked that killing Cyan must have been difficult. She speculated on the events leading to his death, suggesting he might have been killed by the owner of Duran d'Arc, either in a duel or through betrayal. She leaned toward the latter, reasoning that Cyan looked at the holy sword with disdain. Kairam deduced that Cyan's goal was likely revenge. She warned him that if she ever saw him falter, she would take over his body completely. Cyan smacked her on the head, reminding her to know her place, leaving Kairam dizzy on the ground. In his mind, Cyan reflected that she hadn't changed at all. She was exactly the same as in his previous life. Leaving the tent, Cyan noticed a commotion around him. Emily greeted him hurriedly, and he asked if something had happened. Emily reported that high-level monsters had been sighted near the valley's entrance. Cyan felt a pang of nervousness, suspecting she might be referring to the deathworm. Emily added that it had been a long time since such monsters appeared near the camps. Cyan inquired if she knew anything else, specifically about any suspicious individuals or anything related to him. Before Emily could respond, Jokin called for Cyan, informing him that the Duke wanted to see him immediately. Feeling slightly apprehensive, Cyan thought of the situation as a nuisance. He hadn't been able to dispose of the corpses the previous night because soldiers had shown up unexpectedly. He gritted his teeth, worrying that his plan to enjoy a quiet life before entering the academy might be ruined. Arriving at the Duke's tent, he greeted his father, expecting him to realize he was the one who had slain the monsters. The Duke acknowledged his presence and asked him to sit. Cyan, looking serious and nervous, anticipated a difficult conversation. He racked his brain for a plausible excuse. The Duke began directly, asking Cyan what he had been doing the previous night. Cyan claimed he had gone to bed early due to exhaustion. The Duke found this suspicious, noting that the sword traces resembled Cyan's technique. However, he started to think he might be overanalyzing the situation. Cyan asked why the Duke was inquiring, which brought the Duke back from his thoughts. The Duke rationalized that it was impossible for someone as young as Cyan to have slain a deathworm. Seeing his father distracted, Cyan called for his attention. The Duke assumed Cyan was already aware of the previous night's events and decided to investigate further, suspecting the involvement of the secret organization, MIST. Cyan pretended this was his first time hearing about MIST. The Duke explained that MIST was an ancient organization, notorious for assassinating nobles under the guise of purification, leaving behind black fog wherever they operated. They had vanished 100 years ago, but the deathworm's corpse was shrouded in black fog, a mark of Eru, the god of darkness worshipped by MIST and the source of their power. The Duke speculated that MIST was responsible for the deathworm and other demonic beast killings. Cyan marveled at his father's ability to deduce the culprit despite MIST's last known activity being centuries ago. The Duke admitted they had no clear reason for MIST's sudden reappearance and advised Cyan to stay vigilant. Nonetheless, he planned to notify the Empire and conduct a thorough investigation. With that, Cyan believed his father had accepted the explanation. In his mind, the Duke found it implausible for someone as young as Cyan to be involved with such an ancient organization. He decided to end that line of inquiry and moved on. Turning to Cyan, he asked if he knew who was visiting them today. Cyan replied that he had heard His Majesty would be visiting, but didn't realize it was today. The Duke then requested a favor, which made Cyan slightly anxious. Moments later, the sound of a horn echoed through the camp, followed by the announcement of the Emperor's arrival. All the knights, including the Duke, knelt in respect. The Emperor dismounted his horse, calling the Duke by his first name in an excited tone. He tapped the Duke on the shoulder, urging him not to be so formal since they were old friends. When the Emperor's gaze fell on Cyan, he remained indifferent. Cyan introduced himself respectfully. The Emperor commented that a boy Cyan's age living in such an environment was evidence that the Duke's children were extraordinary. Cyan, remembering the favor his father had asked of him, displayed a goofy smile. Initially nervous, he realized the favor was simply to present himself as the Duke's son. In his past life, Cyan had always been confined to the mansion during the Emperor's visits. Now, he felt deeply touched by his father's trust. The Emperor then announced that he wanted to introduce someone as well. A young lady stepped out of the carriage and introduced herself as Erin Severus, the fifth princess of the Ushif Empire. Cyan recalled her as the tragic fifth princess. Earlier, the Duke had asked Cyan to escort Princess Erin for the day. Although Cyan was unsure how to handle it, the Duke assured him that all he needed to do was keep her company. He explained that the princess was the same age as Cyan, and they would likely see each other more often at the academy. Cyan remembered seeing her in his past life between classes. The Duke encouraged Cyan to become acquainted with the princess, hinting at the potential benefits of befriending someone from the royal family. Although Cyan internally resisted the idea, he understood his father's intentions. The Duke likely hoped for a friendship similar to his own with the Emperor. However, Cyan doubted this would happen with Princess Erin, given the future events only he knew about. Despite his annoyance, he decided to comply for now. As Princess Erin began to speak, Cyan focused his attention. She asked why the river was red. Cyan confirmed she was referring to the Blood River and explained that it was a stream running through the entire Lemia Valley. The water turned red due to demonic beasts, who, when old or injured and unable to compete for survival, instinctively jumped into the river. Their corpses and bodily fluids decomposed in the water, tinted by the mana, giving the river its distinctive color. The princess's expression turned to shock and disgust upon learning this. Cyan casually added that demonic beasts also drank and bathed in the river, advising her to stay out of it due to its disgusting nature. The princess, still disgusted, asked what lay at the end of the river. Cyan replied that it led to the demon realm. The princess was extremely shocked and wanted to confirm if it was truly where demons lived. Seizing the opportunity to tease her, Cyan, with a mischievous grin, told her that if she followed the river, she might even meet the Demon King. The princess was terrified after hearing that. In his mind, Cyan knew no rational person would actually follow the river to the demon realm. However, he found it entertaining to tease the princess. Suddenly, a bright light flared up, capturing everyone's attention. The princess, startled, asked what it was. Cyan explained that it was the signal from the 3rd century post in the west. A yellow light indicated approaching demonic beasts. The princess was taken aback by the presence of demonic beasts. Immediately, the Duke issued an order to ensure the Emperor's protection. He directed the Guardian Knight Division to accompany him to the 3rd century post. The Emperor, addressing the Duke by his first name, Willius, told him not to be so cautious. The Duke was perplexed by this response. The Emperor asked if the Duke thought he had come for a leisurely stroll and, to underline his point, drew his sword. The Duke sighed but acquiesced to the Emperor's wishes. The Emperor then commanded his knights to join the demonic beast raid, instructing them to focus solely on exterminating the beasts until the raid concluded. The Duke also ordered Cyan to participate, to which Cyan readily agreed. The princess, concerned, asked Cyan if he could really fight the demonic beasts. He assured her that he could, mentioning that he often provided support from the back. He then advised the princess to retreat to the shelter for safety. Unexpectedly, the princess insisted on accompanying him. Internally, Cyan was baffled by her insistence. She argued that they were the same age, so she should be allowed to come too. With a bored expression, Cyan explained that battles were dangerous and not a playground. Despite his warning, the princess persisted. Growing increasingly annoyed, Cyan called for Jokin. Jokin appeared promptly, stating that he would take over from the royal knights and escort the princess to safety. He courteously invited the princess to come with him. The princess looked at Cyan, feeling affronted, and accused him of impudence for daring to treat her, a princess, in such a manner. Cyan stepped closer to her, his eyes wide and his tone firm. He told her that her stubbornness could cost the lives of dozens of knights. He emphasized that in battle, a split-second decision could mean the difference between life and death. In a menacing tone, he asked if she could take responsibility for all those lives. The princess's eyes welled up with tears. As Cyan turned to leave, he told her to return to the shelter if she was going to cry like a child. The princess, Jokin, and her maid stood there, taken aback. Meanwhile, the knights encountered a massive slime-like monster that had already devoured several humans. The Duke commanded them to hold their ground. As they neared the creature, he ordered them to halt and reform their lines. He then commanded everyone to protect His Majesty and to slay every single monster, sparing none. Diane Severus, the Emperor of the Ushif Empire, was married to 2 women over his reign. His first wife, Diana Quizzle, has passed away. His second wife, Cassandra Nepellus, holds a significant role as the empire's foremost judicial authority. Diana, the former empress, bore him 2 daughters, the first and second princesses. Cassandra, the current empress, bore him 2 sons, the third and fourth princes. However, there is also a 5th princess, Irene Severus, who was born out of wedlock to a peasant mistress. Irene, due to her mixed heritage, was often scorned and treated like a mere figurehead of royalty. Despite this, she remained unfazed by others' opinions, dutifully serving the royal family and dedicating herself to her studies with unmatched diligence. Tragically, she was falsely accused of treason by those who despised her and was subsequently expelled from the royal family and the empire. Rumors later circulated that she died alone from an illness on a remote island, earning her the moniker of the tragic princess. People believed that her downfall was due to her ambitions and that a simpler life without aspirations might have been better for her. Karim recounted this story to Cyan, attributing it to the tales shared by the Duke about his past life. Shaun noted the difference, remarking that the princess's fate was deeply entwined with royal politics. As lightning struck a distant monster, Cyan observed several more bolts of lightning and commented on the emperor's prowess. Emperor Dian possessed the ability known as Holy Lightning, which he wielded to eliminate the monsters. Publicly acknowledged as an 8-star mage, Dian's magical prowess was so formidable that, had he not ascended to the throne, he would likely have been the head of the Mage Association. Cyan mused with amusement that the emperor could easily handle an intermediate-rank demonic beast and speculated that ruling the empire might just be a hobby for him. Following the brief skirmish, an exquisite liquor was served, and the emperor remarked on the rarity of sharing a drink with his old friend, Villiers. However, he felt a bit lonely being the only one drinking. The Duke apologized, explaining that he abstains from alcohol while on the front lines. The emperor then shared his concerns when the Duke inquired about the current state of the empire. He revealed a recent surge in noble assassinations, which was causing widespread anxiety among the populace. The Duke inquired if any patterns had emerged in the string of noble assassinations. The emperor confirmed, noting that all the slain nobles were corrupt officials and that each crime scene was marked by the presence of a black fog. Curious, the emperor asked the Duke if he had any insights. The Duke revealed that he had encountered similar traces at the battlefront, suggesting that the emperor's suspicions about the movements of certain followers were correct. However, the emperor tasked the Duke with further investigation. Expressing his gratitude but emphasized the growing anxiety among the people, which he could not ignore. Another concern troubled the emperor. Some nobles were maliciously blaming the fifth princess, Aren, for the incidents. When the Duke sought clarification, the emperor explained that he had dismissed these accusations as baseless, yet it seemed there was a faction intent on exploiting her. As a friend rather than an emperor, Dian requested a favor from the Duke. Should he perish before the Duke, he wanted him to look after Aren. Villiers Vart solemnly promised to fulfill the emperor's wish. Dian expressed his thanks. Later that day, heavy rain began to fall, and everyone took shelter in their tents, including Emily, who seemed puzzled by the day's events. Cyan asked her what she expected, to which Emily replied that dealing with a princess should have been more significant. She chided Cyan, suggesting that his approach would prevent him from ever marrying. Amused, Cyan thought to himself that the interaction hadn't even been a date. He prepared to leave, entrusting Emily with the responsibilities in his absence. Emily questioned his intention to train in such heavy rain, but Cyan reassured her. Unbeknownst to him, someone stood outside his tent. Emily was taken aback upon seeing the figure and inquired who it was. The girl lowered her hood, revealing herself to be Princess Aren. She asked Cyan if he was available for a chat. Excited, Emily acted like a fangirl upon seeing the princess. The three of them entered the tent, guarded by royal knights outside. Aren asked Cyan how long he had been there, to which he replied it had been a month. When he inquired about the reason for her visit, Aren hesitated and then requested that the maid be excused due to her staring. Cyan asked Emily to step outside. As she left, Emily's comment about having a good time together bewildered them both. Cyan humorously thought to himself that enjoying time with a 10-year-old was out of the question. Princess Aren, blushing, apologized for her earlier behavior, acknowledging it was unworthy of a princess. Cyan reassured her, saying it was no issue and apologized for his own rudeness. Aren laughed and admitted she would have felt the same in his position. She noted how respected and mature Cyan seemed compared to her. From this exchange, Cyan gained insight into Aren's character. She then asked if he was also joining the academy, hinting at the possibility of friendship. Before Princess Aren could finish her sentence, Cyan interrupted her with an apology. He told her that he believed he wouldn't be of any help to her. This statement shook the princess deeply. Cyan then bluntly suggested that if she was there just to make friends, she should leave. With tears streaming down her face, Aren expressed her desire to be on good terms, accusing Cyan of being harsh. Despite her emotional display, there was a menacing aura about her as she asked if he, too, considered her merely a shell of a princess. Cyan remained silent. The princess, feeling defeated, retreated, saying she understood there was no benefit in befriending her and apologized for wasting his time. She lamented her naivety in thinking they could at least have a conversation. Aren then compared him to Sir Ashel, stating he was completely different. This struck a nerve in Cyan, stirring deep emotions. He grabbed her arm, causing Aren to yell in surprise and demand to know what was wrong with him. Cyan, with murderous eyes, demanded to know how she knew his brother. Aren explained that she had met Ashel during a tour of the Royal Academy the previous year. He had advised her to disregard others' opinions and focus on fulfilling her role as a princess. Cyan, in his mind, scoffed at what he perceived as hollow advice, knowing his brother's true nature better than anyone. He realized that everything had started when Ashel met Aren, suspecting a plot against her. Their tense conversation was abruptly interrupted by a loud noise. Emily rushed into the tent, urging Cyan to run, but the tent's roof had already been breached. A powerful attack landed with a thunderous impact. The knights cursed as they watched a gigantic ogre swing its bat-like weapon into the young master's tent. They hurried to check on Cyan's condition. Emily, seeing the weapon embedded in the ground, was overwhelmed with worry and called out for the young master, tears streaming down her face. The monster revealed itself to be a giant ogre. Meanwhile, in another location, the emperor was taken aback by a report. Advanced rank demonic beasts had ambushed the rear camps of the border regions, where Princess Aren happened to be. The emperor immediately ordered the imperial army to head to the rear camps, prioritizing the princess's safety. He wondered who she had been planning to see there. Back at the scene, Cyan, still alive, observed the chaos from behind the debris. Several ogres, along with deathworms, were part of the attack. Cyan, Emily, Princess Aren, and several knights took cover behind a large rock. These monsters should only have been found in the deeper regions of the valley, yet they were now attacking the rear camp. Cyan suspected that something significant had changed, and wondered if it was connected to him. Emily, sobbing, called out to him, initially believing he was dead and vowing never to leave his side again. When the roof of the tent had collapsed earlier, Cyan had immediately rushed to protect Princess Aren. He thought to himself that having once slain the Demon King, he wouldn't fall to a mere ogre. Princess Aren expressed her concern for the knights at the camp, but Emily assured her that they were strong and capable. Fighting back her tears, blamed herself for endangering the knights by coming to the rear camp. The knights, however, reassured her, stating that protecting her was their duty as imperial knights. One knight, in particular, emphasized this point, unaware that these were to be his last words. Cyan sensed danger and urgently yelled for everyone to move. The confused knight didn't notice the ogre's hand reaching for him until it was too late. The ogre grabbed and squeezed him until he coughed up blood. The scene was horrifying for Princess Aren. Cyan quickly positioned himself in front of her, ordering her to step back. The ogre's sinister smile confirmed Cyan's suspicion, it was targeting him. Cyan told the others that he would distract the ogre while they escaped with the princess. Emily responded with an enthusiastic okay, leaving Cyan momentarily dumbfounded. She grabbed Princess Aren and urged the remaining knight to move, comically irritating Cyan with her eagerness to flee. The ogre roared loudly, demanding Cyan's attention. Cyan unsheathed his sword, leapt high, and slashed the ogre's arm. He pondered why advanced rank demonic beasts seemed drawn to him, suspecting they were detecting something from him. Karam, appearing amused, explained that his strength came from consuming the blood of countless demonic beasts, which made him reek of them, thus attracting their attention. Cyan was both surprised and annoyed that Karam had known this all along and was only telling him now. She grinned and reminded him of her desire for his body, to which Cyan responded by grabbing her tightly, making her groan, and then assumed a combat stance. Karam asked what he was doing and requested gentler treatment, but Cyan curtly told her to shut up. Standing resolute before the ferocious ogre, he declared that he didn't care how many monsters came at him. As the ogre attacked, Cyan swiftly countered, slicing its arm before it could strike. The ogre roared in pain, and Cyan followed up with another powerful attack. As Cyan's final attack landed, the ogre fell in defeat. Sensing that no one was watching, Cyan decided to take a sip of the advanced rank demonic beast blood. Karam got excited about the feast, but Cyan was suddenly shocked by the sight of a large purple claw gripping the edge of a nearby cliff. It belonged to a devil dragon. The creature roared loudly, and Karam explained that it was still a baby and must have been drawn by Cyan's scent. However, Cyan wasn't concerned with why the dragon was there. He activated his demonic sword, ready to confront it. He instructed Karam to catch and consume the dragon. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the remaining ogres were being struck down by the Emperor's lightning. After the last ogre fell, the Emperor asked Vilyarth if that was the final one. The Duke confirmed it seemed so, but the Emperor was not entirely satisfied. He inquired about the princess and the Duke's son, but Vilyarth apologized, stating that he found no traces beyond the tent. The Emperor, recognizing the Duke's worry for his son, assured him it was understandable. Vilyarth insisted that the princess's safety was the priority. The Emperor, about to scold the Duke for his perceived coldness, instead remarked on it, to which the Duke replied that his son, Avert, knew how to take care of himself. Just then, a knight reported that they had located the princess. The emperor, seeking confirmation, was relieved when Princess Aren appeared. He immediately rushed to her, grabbing her shoulders and asking if she was hurt. In a panic, Princess Aren insisted they hurry to save someone. The emperor, confused, asked who she meant. Aren, crying, revealed that it was Cyan, blaming herself for the situation. Behind the emperor, the duke stood tense, his posture stiffening. The emperor urged the princess to calm down and explain what happened. The duke then approached Emily, inquiring if she was Cyan's maid. With a frightening expression, he demanded to know if something had happened to Cyan. Trembling, Emily, who had never seen the duke so intimidating, stuttered as she explained that the young master had acted as bait to allow them time to escape. The duke's brows furrowed with concern. A knight then reported that he remembered Cyan's last known location and offered to lead a rescue effort. The emperor, turning to Vilyarth, asked what he was waiting for and urged him to hurry. The duke's expression turned menacing as he declared that they would not be launching a rescue mission. Princess Aren was taken aback, and the emperor questioned if he was serious. The duke explained that their priority should be stabilizing the situation. If the camps fell, the demonic beasts would invade the empire. He insisted they must focus on reconstructing the defenses immediately to prevent further casualties. Emily's tears flowed as she asked what would happen to the young master. The knight clenched his teeth in frustration. The duke responded that Cyan had fulfilled his duty by aiding in the princess's evacuation, emphasizing that this was the responsibility of a Vert. The emperor and Princess Aren both appeared sullen, with Aren blaming herself for the predicament. Suddenly, a loud monster cry pierced the air. Everyone's attention shifted upwards, where they saw a dragon soaring through the sky. Princess Aren could hardly believe her eyes when she noticed a person clinging to the dragon's leg. Upon closer inspection, it was Cyan, holding on tightly as the dragon flew. His grip was firm, but his expression betrayed a mix of silent tears and reluctant determination. The sight was almost comical, given the dire circumstances. Dragons, majestic beings believed to be closest to the Creator, are exceedingly rare and noble. Lesser creatures, like humans, rarely dare to approach them. Cyan Vert considered it an honor to encounter such an exalted creature. However, he couldn't help but question why the dragon had to fly over the very people he desperately wanted to avoid. The dragon soared over Aren, causing her to call out Cyan's name. His Majesty was stunned by the appearance of a dragon and immediately demanded to know from Vilyarth why his son was riding it. The emperor was in a panic, but Vilyarth remained calm. When the emperor asked if Vilyarth intended to save his son, Cyan internally cursed. All he wanted was to drink the dragon's blood. He hadn't anticipated this situation. Earlier, an evil dragon had appeared, and Cyan had instructed Karam to eat it. But before they could act, a swarm of random monsters attacked. Cyan, now possessed by Karam, heard Cyan say there was no time to waste. The fog storm soared, slicing through several monsters at once. Cyan landed in front of the dragon, noting it was not fully grown. The dragon released a powerful laser beam, shattering the ground. Cyan scolded the dragon for its rudeness and challenged it by slashing its eye. The dragon, enraged, blasted Cyan away and chased him. Cyan, grinning, unleashed an attack called the 8 Fluttering Petals, causing a massive explosion. Despite his efforts, Cyan admitted he wasn't ready to take on a dragon. His shoulders were sore. He decided to wrap things up, but the dragon flapped its wings, creating a gust of wind. Determined not to be fooled again, Cyan noticed something amusing. The dragon was fleeing from him. Calling it a cowardly lizard, he jumped high to give chase, leading to his current predicament. Now, Cyan contemplated his luck in encountering the dragon. Looking down, he wondered how to handle the situation. Karam asked what was wrong, and Cyan, annoyed, pointed out the people below. Karam argued that if he unsheathed her, he had to do something. He retorted that using a demonic sword with so many witnesses would lead to him being burned at the stake. Karam insisted he couldn't just stay on the dragon, and their banter was both tense and humorous. Meanwhile, Vilyarth prepared an advanced 8-star magic circle. Cyan panicked, recognizing his father's intent to use the secret sword of heavens, knowing he might get caught in it. Golden sword shot towards the dragon, and Cyan, surprisingly, cheered for the dragon to evade them. Just as the dragon was about to dodge the final sword, it was struck, causing Cyan to fall. As he plummeted, he cursed the missed opportunity for a special meal. Karam appeared, asking if he planned to fall or if he had a plan. Cyan, with a deadpan expression, admitted he didn't know and stopped thinking until he sensed something. He told Karam there was a way, despite her horrified expression. She said in that shitty water, but Cyan saw no other choice. As they descended, someone sensed the commotion. A person with 2 horns noticed the devil dragon, a rare sight, and another horned man noted it was a young dragon in trouble. The silver-haired man commented on the presence of strong demonic beasts, but the red-haired man clarified it was humans across the border. Surprised, the silver-haired man felt a strange but familiar energy. The red-haired man suggested checking it out, warning against causing trouble out of boredom. The silver-haired man's wings appeared, assuring he wouldn't cause problems. Meanwhile, Cyan emerged from the red, bubbling water, exhausted and disgusted. He groaned, muttering, "What a shitty life," and checked on Karam, who was equally annoyed. Kiram's expression was one of clear annoyance. She told Cyan not to speak to her and that she was considering how to kill him. Cyan tried to pacify her, promising they would clean up once they got back, and asked her not to be mad. Karam retorted, asking if he really thought they could just go back, reminding him they were in the demon realm. He assured her there's no way they would encounter a higher demon. Just as he began to respond, someone interrupted. A voice confirmed Cyan's words, suggesting something fun awaited him there. Cyan's body shivered, he recognized that voice. The demon, none other than the demon king Valkyrian, called out to Cyan. The voice was so deeply embedded in Cyan's mind that he could never forget it. Now, with a furious expression, Cyan faced Valkyrian. The demon king asked if he was human, and the sight of him, the embodiment of evil, filled Cyan with dread. He couldn't afford to take his eyes off the demon king, knowing he could be killed instantly. Valkyrian reiterated his question, asking if Cyan was human and why he wasn't answering. Suddenly, Valkyrian appeared behind Cyan, asking if he wanted to fight. Alarmed, Cyan attempted to slash Valkyrian, managing to cut a strand of his hair, which surprised the demon king. Valkyrian laughed, relaxed, and commented on humans' infinite potential, suggesting it might be true. Karam, confused, asked who this was. Cyan replied it was the demon king, shocking Karam. She asked how he planned to defeat the demon king in his current state. Cyan knew it was impossible and considered running away. His hands trembled as he wondered if he could survive against Valkyrian. The demon king, sensing his fear, told Cyan to relax and assured him he wouldn't harm a kid. To prove his point, he lay leisurely on the ground, stating he wouldn't fight children. Cyan couldn't help but find the demon king's random actions amusing. Valkyrian asked again if Cyan was human, and Cyan confirmed it. The demon king then inquired how Cyan ended up there. Cyan explained it was due to the current of the water. Valkyrian, sensing a strange aura from Cyan, asked who he was. Sweating, Cyan replied he was just a normal human. The demon king found it odd, feeling like Cyan knew him. Cyan insisted they had never met. Valkyrian acknowledged this, noting he'd never seen a human before and wondered when Cyan could have seen him. Cyan then asked why the demon king was there. In his head, he noted the relaxed demeanor of Valkyrian and wondered if he was the same demon king he knew of. Valkyrian explained he felt a strange energy while making his rounds. When Cyan inquired about making rounds, Valkyrian elaborated that, as the demon king, he watched over his lands. However, Valkyrian stopped mid-sentence, sat down, and asked Cyan to repeat what he had just said. Cyan repeated that it was a given for the demon king to watch over his lands. Valkyrian then wore a funny expression, asking Cyan why he wasn't shocked to hear he was the demon king. At that moment, Cyan was caught. The demon king realized that Cyan knew him from somewhere because no ordinary kid would react so calmly. Valkyrian even joked, asking if Cyan's mother never threatened him with the demon king taking him away if he misbehaved. Cyan thought there was no way this was the same demon king he knew of. He assumed that if things followed his past experiences, the demon invasion should start soon. But observing Valkyrian, he noted that this demon king didn't seem like someone who would initiate such an invasion. Cyan began to ponder what might have caused Valkyrian to change so drastically, thinking that if this was the demon king's true self, something significant must have triggered his transformation. Curiosity got the better of him, and he asked Valkyrian what he wished to achieve as a demon king. The demon king smiled, finding Cyan's boldness amusing, but answered that his primary desire was for his people to live well and prosper. However, he added with a deadly seriousness that he would not hesitate to kill anyone who threatened his realm, as it was his duty. A chill ran down Cyan's spine. In that brief moment, he glimpsed the true monstrosity of the Valkyrian from his past life. He realized that the demon king's darker nature was merely repressed, and some event must have unleashed it. Determined to prevent that incident, Cyan proposed a deal to Valkyrian. He warned the demon king of an impending event that would threaten his people, likely leading to a catastrophic war between humans and demons. Valkyrian, now agitated, asked if Cyan was implying that he, the demon king, would seek to conquer human lands in the future. Cyan confirmed this and urged Valkyrian to promise that he wouldn't start a war regardless of what happened. Though confused, Valkyrian agreed but asked what Cyan would offer in return. Cyan pledged to help Valkyrian, vowing to do everything in his power to support him through whatever might happen. Valkyrian, intrigued by Cyan's resolve, leaned closer, trying to discern what the young man knew. Cyan, though slightly intimidated, held his ground and introduced himself as Cyan Vert. The Demon King, impressed, promised not to invade human territories no matter what transpired, and with that, their deal was sealed. Valkyrian took to the sky, reminding Cyan to uphold his end of the bargain. Cyan nodded, understanding the gravity of their agreement. After their encounter, Cyan was discovered by knights on the shore. They marveled at his survival, referring to him as the boy who lived through the encounter with the devil dragon. He was brought back to an abbey on the borders of Velius, temporarily repurposed as a military hospital. Upon regaining consciousness, Cyan apologized to Princess Erin, who was at his side. She blushed and asked if he remembered her question, which Cyan assumed meant everything was resolved. Then, with a mix of embarrassment and hope, Princess Erin asked him to be hers. Without fully understanding her intent, Cyan nonchalantly declined, saying, "Nah." Princess Erin was taken aback by the immediate rejection. On the verge of tears, she lamented that, of course, he would decline her. After all, she was just a powerless princess. Inwardly, Cyan found her self-pity irritating. He knew she was powerless, but it was her attitude that grated on him. He couldn't shake the thought that his despicable brother was somehow involved in her tragic fate. "You're right," Cyan replied. "As you are now, you can't bring any benefit to yourself or anyone else. You lack influence and proper etiquette. Being associated with you would actually be detrimental to me. However," he then added, "but I'll keep an eye on you from afar until you become someone better." Erin, surprised by his statement, sought confirmation. When Cyan reiterated his point, he told her not to be disappointed. Blushing, she understood that she needed to improve to gain his acknowledgement. Pointing a determined finger at him, she vowed, "Wait and see. I don't know when, but I'll become so powerful that you won't be able to ignore me." Cyan responded, "I'm looking forward to it," while noting how quickly she cheered up. Before leaving, Erin, still blushing, thanked him for being alive. Cyan's expression remained deadpan. A few days later, at the rear camps on the outskirts of the forest, a man was looking around, silently laughing as he held a glowing box. "Not much left now," he muttered. Suddenly, a voice interrupted, "So it's you, Reynold Crimson." Reynold found himself unable to move, feeling as though invisible chains bound him. The person approaching him had an ominous aura. Reynold was holding a small dimensional box, an artifact with a dimensional realm and enough mana for infinite storage. The person identified it as the masterpiece of the Garum Kingdom's Mage Association. Reynold realized that this person had been watching him for a year, suspecting someone within the Empire was smuggling artifacts. The observer, now confronting him, took the box and correctly identified Reynold as a 7-star mage knight from the Garum Kingdom. Recognizing the person, Reynold asked, "Cyan Vert, why are you here?" Cyan emptied the container, revealing monster body parts. He deduced that Reynold had extracted the blood of demonic corpses and smuggled them in supply carriages. Cyan suspected there was also a spy aiding Reynold in the supply department. Reynold feigned ignorance, but Cyan cut him off, stating that he knew the blood was already on the black market. He speculated that Alice obtained Hellhound blood from Reynold's operations. Regardless, Cyan knew he couldn't let Reynold live. Reynold, unsure how Cyan had captured him, regained some mobility and used magic, unleashing a large flame. "Disappear!" Reynold commanded, believing Cyan would perish. He watched as his flames engulfed the area where Cyan had stood, then sighed, thinking he had lost the dimensional box in the chaos. Out of nowhere, Reynold's hand was severed, blood gushing like a fountain. A black fog surrounded him, and Cyan reappeared, holding Reynold by the neck. Cyan gave him two options: reveal the smuggling route and the identity of the spy and die a painless death, or suffer a torturous demise so horrific that even Satan would pity him. At the Velia's western border trading post, people were busy carrying large boxes, unaware of the deadly confrontation unfolding nearby. Two men were happily inspecting the contents of several crates, pleased with the extra loot they had acquired this time. As one of them opened another crate, curious about its contents, they were met with a gruesome surprise. Inside was Reynold's severed head. Stunned, they wondered who could have done this. Watching from a distance, Cyan observed the busy area. Karam asked if he planned to intervene with those men. He replied that he would leave them be, believing that the warning was sufficient. Reynold Crimson, a 7-star mage knight from the Garum Kingdom, had been smuggling demonic beast blood from the front lines behind the Ushif Empire's back. The contraband was transported to the Garum Kingdom's Mage Association, a hub for mages fanatically obsessed with magic. They studied the origins and foundations of magic, constantly striving to surpass human limits, creating useful artifacts like the Dimensional Box. Cyan knew that if left unchecked, they would conduct dangerous experiments with demonic beast blood in the future, and he was determined to stop them. Karam commented on Cyan's seemingly selfless act, noting that she thought he only looked out for himself. He responded that he simply didn't want more people using demonic beast blood. Meanwhile, at a residence in the Ushif Empire, Ashil gazed out the window. He received a report that Cyan Vert had gone to the front lines with their father. A woman in his bed recognized the name as Ashil's half-brother. Ashil, annoyed by Cyan, decided it was time to pay him a visit. The scene shifted to two pieces of luggage placed aside. Emily, thrilled to be away from the front lines, celebrated. She eagerly anticipated the academy, believing it would be a refreshing change from the gloomy battlefield. Cyan, however, knew better. To him, the academy was a political snake pit, full of schemes, envy, and jealousy, where networking trumped education. Emily excitedly mentioned hearing about the handsome instructors, hoping for romance. This made Cyan question if she was really there for him or something else. Hours later, Cyan's luggage was unloaded from the carriage, and as he walked around, he encountered Krantz, who trembled at the sight of him. Before Cyan could greet him, Krantz fled in terror. Karam asked about the frightened man. Cyan explained that he was his half-brother and not to worry about him. Karam noted how different Cyan was from his family, to which he silently agreed, thinking the true opposite was someone else entirely. Upon entering his home, Cyan was surprised by the butler's sudden politeness, a stark contrast to the usual indifference. He sensed that someone significant was present. As he turned the doorknob, he felt a familiar, shudder-inducing aura. Behind the door was Ashil, greeting him with a smile. Cyan struggled to remain calm as Ashil, with darkening vision, reminded him of their last meeting before he went to the academy. Overwhelmed, Cyan considered attacking Ashil but was stopped by Karam, who reminded him that it wasn't the right time. And he is too weak to fight against Ashil yet. Composing himself, Cyan politely greeted his brother. Ashil, pleased, expressed relief that Cyan remembered him and commented on his improved swordsmanship, suggesting he would soon help their father in battle. Cyan, with concealed rage, replied that he looked forward to it. Ashil observed him and, noting his murderous intent, claimed to be glad to see him. Emily, meanwhile, complained about Cyan not helping with her baggage. When she opened a door, expecting to scold him, she was shocked to see Ashil instead. Ashil, aware of her familiarity with Cyan, reassured her to continue her work. After he left, Emily, nervous, scolded Cyan for not warning her about Ashil's presence. Cyan, needing solitude, sternly told her to leave him alone, which she did, worried. Cyan, in the restroom, vomited and breathed heavily. When he asked Karam why she stopped him from attacking Ashil, she retorted that he should be grateful. She explained that his growing rage would make him more satisfying to her. Cyan, smiling, acknowledged her insight. Meanwhile, Ashil, in another part of the house, received a report about tracking down his sister in the north, in the territory of the White Elves, Fruina. Noting Fruina's reputation for hating outsiders, Ashil commended his sister's diplomatic skills. He instructed the man to inform him when she prepared to return. The man, noticing Ashil's bright demeanor, asked if he enjoyed meeting Cyan. Ashil, reflecting on Cyan's murderous gaze, admitted he was in a terrible mood. He realized Cyan viewed him as a nemesis and decided to keep a close watch on him, curious about what Cyan was hiding. The day had finally arrived for Cyan's departure. Outside the mansion, a carriage awaited him, surrounded by several knights. Emily, visibly angry, expressed her disappointment to her young master. Cyan tried to explain that it wasn't his choice to have only a knight escort him to the academy, but Emily's frustration stemmed from not being able to accompany him herself. She lamented that he should have informed her earlier. Accepting the situation, Cyan bid his farewell, advising Emily to behave herself. Despite her anger, Emily wished him well, though she was clearly upset. Cyan, with a smug expression, signaled the carriage to start moving. As it did, Emily was left speechless at his abrupt departure. She then yelled for him not to be disheartened even if he faced bullying, waving goodbye and urging him to take care. In his mind, Cyan thought this was typical of Emily. He reminisced about a memory from when he was 8 years old, bedridden with a severe fever and losing consciousness frequently. No one was there to care for him except Emily, who carried him on her back through heavy rain to the nearest doctor. She tirelessly screamed for help until an old man opened his clinic door, saving Cyan's life. He knew that without Emily, he might have died that night. To Cyan, Emily was one of the most cherished people in his life. He smiled brightly at her, reminding her to stay in line, or she might end up in trouble. Emily, understanding his way of expressing affection, pretended not to hear his parting words. After the emotional goodbye, Cyan leaned back with a satisfied look. However, his expression darkened as he pondered why 6 intermediate knights were needed to escort him to the academy. Sighing, he thought trouble was likely before he even arrived. As the day wore on, the carriage continued its journey. 2 knights exchanged a glance, seemingly a signal. When the carriage stopped, a knight informed Cyan they would camp for the night. Cyan inquired about their location and was told they were in the central city of Saffron, expected to arrive in the morning. Agreeing, Cyan instructed the knight to notify him when the camp was ready. However, Cyan knew the knight lied. There was no forest like this near Saffron, and it was clear they were in the middle of nowhere. Suspecting foul play, he waited. Eventually, the knights called him out, and Cyan commented on the refreshing air while surveying the surroundings. He noticed the knights had encircled him, their swords ready to be drawn. Cyan then asked who was behind this, but his question was met with silence and nervous glances among the knights. One knight, however, wore a different expression, a smile. This irked Cyan, who demanded an answer with a more intimidating demeanor. The smiling knight stepped forward, claiming Cyan didn't need to know as he would soon be dead. He approached Cyan, pointing his sword, and advised him to cooperate to ensure a painless death. Cyan simply needed to stand still with his eyes closed. As the knight charged at Cyan, shouting, "Goodbye," the blade neared Cyan's neck. Despite this, Cyan remained unfazed. In an instant, a head flew through the air, but it wasn't Cyan's, it was his assailant's. The knights were stunned by the sight. Holding his demonic sword, Cyan demanded, "I asked, who the hell is behind this?" The atmosphere shifted dramatically, and the knights began to feel an overwhelming sense of fear. Cyan's eyes glowed red as he questioned why they were frozen in place. Did none of them anticipate this outcome? The knight at the back couldn't believe what he was seeing, while the others, regaining their senses, charged at Cyan. Their efforts were futile, this was a battle they couldn't win. One by one, they screamed in agony as Cyan's sword pierced their bodies. Noticing a knight attempting to flee, Cyan effortlessly threw his demonic sword, striking the knight in the back. The last remaining knight, now in tears, couldn't even blink. Surrounded by the fallen bodies of his comrades, he wondered if Cyan was truly an 11-year-old child. Cyan extended his hand, summoning his sword back. The knight realized there was a reason Cyan had survived fighting a dragon. Seeing Cyan's menacing eyes, he knew the mission was doomed from the start. The last knight, trembling, knew what was coming. He fell to the ground, trying to crawl away as Cyan slowly approached. Cyan commanded him to reveal everything, promising his life in exchange for the information. Terrified, the knight immediately divulged that Mrs. Margaret was behind the plot. Cyan, disappointed by the ease of the interrogation, watched as the knight continued to tremble, unable to speak further. The next day, the carriage was on the move again. Cyan had spared the knight, who provided more information. Relaxing atop the carriage, Cyan learned that his stepbrother Krantz had asked their mother for a favor. Upon discovering this, Cyan's dark aura intensified, vowing to teach Krantz a lesson. His attention shifted as the knight addressed him, asking anxiously what would happen to him now. With teary eyes, he wondered if Cyan would kill him. Cyan casually remarked that the knight didn't seem too sad about the prospect. The knight admitted that since they had tried to kill Cyan first, he had no right to resent him if Cyan decided to kill him. To break the tension, Cyan told the knight to just drive, noting the difference between being useless and having no value alive. Shocked, the knight couldn't help but thank Cyan. Moments later, Cyan announced their arrival. Before him stood the grand central city, Saffron. Elsewhere, a vase shattered as a voice demanded an explanation. Mrs. Margaret, trembling with anger, listened as the butler reported that 1 knight was missing and 6 were dead. Cyan had left Saffron 10 days ago. Furious, she blamed the person in front of her for the failure to eliminate Cyan. The butler bowed and apologized, admitting they had underestimated the young master. He suggested someone else might be helping Cyan and pleaded for another chance to finish the job. However, Mrs. Margaret, recalling Cyan's menacing look, feared for her son Krantz's safety if they took further action. She ordered the butler to do nothing and warned him to keep their conversation and the event secret, eliminating anyone who knew. As the butler left, unaware he was being watched, Cyan took a short nap. It had been 10 days since they left Saffron. Brian, the spared knight, had been acting as his subordinate. Cyan assumed Mrs. Margaret knew he was alive and expected to arrive at the Royal Academy safely. He still pondered what to do with Brian. Upon arriving, Brian informed Cyan, who replied irritably. As they reached the academy gates, Cyan reflected on his past there, not all good memories, but the academy had changed him. Entering the building, Cyan presented his emblem and introduced himself as Cyan Vert of the Duke Vert family. The staff responsible for boarding the new students were stunned at the sight of Cyan. One lady quickly regained her composure and promptly attended to him. She confirmed his registration and directed him to proceed to his assigned dormitory to wait. She informed him that the entrance ceremony and the elemental test were scheduled for 2 days later. This information made Cyan pause, wondering if he had heard correctly. The lady handed him the key to his room, which came with a letter. Surprised, Cyan asked if there might have been a mistake. Moments later, Brian dropped the bags he was carrying, his mouth agape. He addressed Cyan, revealing that the room assigned to him was in the Royal Hall, an opulent space unmatched by any other dormitory in the academy. Cyan, noting that no one in his family had ever received such treatment, suspected someone influential was behind this arrangement. Cyan interrupted Brian's amazement by asking if all the luggage had been brought up. Brian nervously confirmed. Cyan then reached into the inner pocket of his coat with a serious expression. He told Brian his role was finished. Brian, panicking, pleaded for Cyan to wait, fearing for his life. To his surprise, Cyan tossed him a bag of gold coins. Brian, bewildered, asked about the money. Cyan explained that it was payment for his hard work over the past few days and enough to start a new life, warning that returning to Valia's could be fatal. Brian was left speechless. Suddenly, he knelt and, with a heartfelt plea, asked for permission to serve Cyan for life. The moment, which should have been filled with fervor, left Cyan in shock as he realized Brian was a knight. Brian explained that he was the lowest-ranking knight and often treated as a mere coachman. Bowing his head, he recounted his father's advice to serve someone he trusted without hesitation if he ever found such a person. Cyan sighed, calling it a foolish notion. Brian was caught off guard by the response. Emitting a dark aura, Cyan asked how Brian could be sure Cyan wouldn't betray him in the future. Brian, without hesitation, replied that it didn't matter if Cyan took his life later. Cyan cut him off, tapping his shoulder and warning him never to think of betrayal. This was Cyan's way of accepting Brian as his knight. Cyan then opened the door, informing Brian they would skip the entrance ceremony and go straight to the elemental test. Brian was still in disbelief over what had transpired. Meanwhile, in the dean's office of the Royal Academy, 2 individuals discussed the talented students taking the elemental test that year. The testing hall was bustling with aspiring students. At the center of a platform stood a student with silver hair, surrounded by a bright light. This was Princess Erin, whose evaluation revealed a mana rank of 2 stars, a physical rank of B, and a light element at 52%. Following her, a muscular student named Seth Chaharkan stepped up to take his test. Seth Chaharkan's evaluation revealed a mana rank of 3 stars, a physical rank of A, and a sand element proficiency of 71%. An elderly man continued reviewing the student records for the year. Though the previous students were impressive, one in particular caught his attention, Cyan. Cyan's results were intriguing. Despite a mana rank of only 1 star, his physical rank was S, and most notably, his proficiency in the dark element was an astounding 92%. This drew a comment from Sarika Nagrithi, a female instructor, who noted that even Alice Vert, heralded as God's child, had only reached 88% proficiency in the water element by graduation. The old man, Dean Kundal Kassel of the Royal Academy, found this information fascinating. Even Alice, lauded for her exceptional talents, couldn't surpass her younger brother. However, Professor Sarika expressed concern about Cyan's dark element. Dean Kundal acknowledged that Cyan's talent might be wasted due to the dark element's nature, but his growth potential couldn't be ignored. Dean Kundal then inquired if Professor Sarika knew that Cyan had been assigned to the Royal Hall. She confirmed, having heard from other instructors. She was shocked when the dean revealed that this was by the Emperor's order. It turned out that Cyan had saved the young princess from monsters at the front lines, and the Emperor was considering a marriage between them. They speculated on the ramifications of the 5th princess, deemed a failure, marrying someone from the renowned Vert family. This union could potentially heighten succession conflicts and even lead to civil war. Dean Kundal advised Sarika to stop overthinking. All they could do was observe and see whether Cyan would become a hero of the Empire or its downfall. Meanwhile, Cyan, the source of these concerns, was casually walking down a hallway. He reflected on how his dark affinity had been just 80% in his past life, wondering if drinking the demonic beast's blood had increased it. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw someone familiar. Cyan greeted Cranes, who panicked, not expecting Cyan to still be alive. Cranes's companion, a chubby boy, reacted differently. The chubby boy, Popper Peniran, son of Marquis Penner of the Garum Kingdom, mocked Cyan, asking Cranes if this was the boy he had treated like a slave. Cranes hesitantly confirmed. Popper taunted Cyan about not knowing his mother, a sore point from Cyan's past life where these two had frequently bullied him. But this time, Cyan was determined to change the outcome. Thinking it must be his lucky day to encounter these bullies, Cyan saw Popper approach with the intent to beat him. Cranes tried to dissuade Popper, suggesting they go to the cafeteria instead, but Popper ignored him and continued toward Cyan. Suddenly, Cyan delivered a powerful kick to Popper, sending him crashing into the wall with such force that it shattered. With a devilish grin, Cyan relished his revenge. Cranes could only cry out in shock, screaming Popper's name. As Popper lay unconscious, Cyan addressed Krantz, suggesting they needed to talk. Krantz, already trembling and tearful, felt Cyan's hand on his shoulder. Leaning in, Cyan whispered that he didn't care what Krantz did behind his back, but warned that if he ever saw him again, there would be consequences. With a grin, Cyan told his stepbrother he'd graduate in a wheelchair, which sent Krantz into a state of sheer panic, making his knees weak. Casually, Cyan walked away, contemplating the fun he anticipated having at the academy. Later that day, in the academy's library, instructor Sarika Negriti walked through the halls. She was the same professor from their last encounter, still pondering the dean's words about Cyan being either the savior or downfall of the empire. Determined to keep a close watch on him, she was there to retrieve a specific book. However, upon reaching the spot, she found it missing. Her mood shifted when she realized the book wasn't there. Suddenly, a voice asked if she was looking for a book, startling her. It was Cyan. Sarika quickly composed herself and smiled, asking how he got in since students weren't allowed in that area. Internally, she noted her inability to sense his presence. She confirmed if he was indeed Mr. Cyanvert and requested the book for her research. Cyan smiled and agreed, handing her the book. But as he did, a dark, ominous aura cut the book in half. Cyan awkwardly distanced himself and asked if that wasn't the book she needed. He started to address her as Instructor Sarika but stopped, revealing her true identity as the assassin organization's Mist's Hallmaster, Sarika Negriti. With a piercing gaze, Sarika demanded to know how he discovered that. Cyan recalled his past life, where he thought of the instructor as ordinary. She had once asked him about his life at the academy during a counseling session, trying to get to know him better. Back then, a bullied Cyan remained silent, and his eyes filled with emptiness when Sarika mentioned seeing great potential in him. He thought it was a joke, considering his life of being bullied by his brother. But his demeanor changed when Sarika expressed her genuine interest in him, noting the rarity of someone with 84% affinity for the dark element. Cyan blushed slightly, mentioning that he'd been told it wasn't a special element. Sarika cheerfully explained that humanity knew little about it, but she believed his growth potential was limitless. Intrigued and confused, Cyan listened as Sarika, with a sweet smile, told him she looked forward to working with him. Those words made Cyan realize that this person might actually be able to help him. Reflecting on the present, he acknowledged that those deceptive smiles had led to his previous misunderstanding. Back then, his naive infatuation prevented him from seeing through the deception. This beautiful woman had used her position as a professor to conceal her true identity. Cyan resolved that he would not be fooled again by her innocent facade, knowing now that she was a deadly assassin. More than that, she was the hallmaster of the assassin organization, Mist, whose mission was to gather information within the academy, where royals and nobles from across the continent studied. As Sarika broke the silence, Cyan lowered his guard. She invited him to her lab, suggesting they continue their conversation there. Removing her glasses, she revealed an astonishingly attractive face, leaving Cyan momentarily speechless. He had expected a more dramatic reaction from her, but she remained composed. Soon, they were in Sarika's lab, a place Cyan noted hadn't changed. Mysterious scrolls and daggers adorned the room. Sipping his tea, Cyan sarcastically remarked that she had poisoned it, reminding himself never to trust her. Sarika laughed, casually admitting the poison wasn't very severe, it would only melt his organs. Unbeknownst to her, Cyan was unaffected due to his consumption of demonic beast's blood and Emily's food. With a serious expression, he suggested she use something stronger next time, signaling that it was time for their real conversation. Sarika began by asking how he discovered her true identity and knew she received her orders from the specific, unpopular book in the library. Intrigued, she speculated that perhaps Cyan was also part of Mist. With a knowing smile, Cyan asked what more proof she needed, which thrilled Sarika. She unleashed her dark aura, accusing him of arrogance due to his elemental test results. Ignoring her taunt, Cyan changed the subject, mentioning that before joining the academy, people questioned if one escort knight was enough to protect him. Sarika looked puzzled as he explained that nobles had been getting murdered recently. Turning to Sarika, Cyan asked when the purification project began. Confused, Sarika repeated his words, denying knowledge of the project while her dark aura intensified. Matching her aura, Cyan clarified that he was referring to the assassinations. Sarika grinned, warning him he might regret his words. Unfazed, Cyan questioned if she was really threatening a student. Suddenly, Sarika kicked the table towards Cyan. Prepared, he punched the table in half, recognizing it as a diversion. Sarika leapt, aiming her weapons at him. Aware of her intentions, Cyan felt he had proven his identity enough. Sarika, still skeptical, prepared to attack, asserting that as Hallmaster, she knew all members of Mist, yet she didn't know him. Landing on the ground, she unleashed a flurry of slashes. Cyan created some distance, and Sarika charged, determined not to let him escape. Sighing, Cyan summoned his weapon, deflecting her attack and catching her off guard. Cyan declared that if she didn't believe him, he would show her. He unleashed a series of slashes, which Sarika struggled to react to. His final strike sent her reeling. Her eyes widened as she recognized the dagger Cyan wielded, the demonic sword, Karam, a weapon only the chosen by Eru could wield. Cyan, now striking a cool pose, asked Sarika once more if she believed him. He also revealed that he knew Mist was seeking a successor, a statement that left Sarika stunned, wondering how he had such information. Cyan then declared that the very person they were searching for was standing right in front of her and demanded she take him to Eru immediately. Later that night, the scene shifted to a quiet street in Lewin, with almost no one around. An old house came into view, and at its door, someone was busy chanting a magic spell to pick the locks. A purple magic circle appeared, and a few seconds later, the door finally opened. Sarika and Cyan, both wearing dark cloaks to conceal their identities, stood beside the door. Breaking the silence, Sarika remarked that Cyan didn't seem surprised to find a Mist base in such a place. She added that this was the path to the altar he wanted to reach and that from this point on, he would be on his own. Dark, ominous aura emanated from the house as Cyan entered alone. Inside, Cyan marveled at the unique realm created by the god of fog, which made the interior much larger than it appeared from the outside. Despite his admiration, he remained vigilant, sensing the presence of hidden adversaries. He noted 2 people at 4 o'clock and another 3 at 11 o'clock. As expected, daggers flew towards him, but Cyan deflected them with ease. The assassins launched their ambush, with 2 appearing behind him. Cyan thought their welcome ceremony was excessive but leaped backwards to avoid their attacks. He then counterattacked, throwing his daggers towards the assassins. Most couldn't react in time, except for one who mirrored Cyan's deflection technique. Impressed, Cyan recognized the skill of this assassin. The mysterious figure signaled for a secret technique expansion, and the assassins regrouped into the Death Horn formation, surrounding Cyan. In response, Cyan exuded a dark red aura and chanted his own secret technique expansion. Raising his hand, he gathered his power, startling the assassins. Despite their hesitation, one of them dismissed the possibility that Cyan could perform such a technique. Cyan unleashed the Bloodthirst Wave, a technique exclusive to assassins, which manifested bloodthirst into a physical form, immobilizing his attackers. Most of them couldn't even breathe. Surveying the fallen assassins, Cyan noted they wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. He showed them mercy, choosing not to kill them. However, he noticed that the assassin who had deflected his dagger was still standing, suggesting this one might be a higher-up. Realizing he couldn't waste more time, Cyan got serious. He activated one of his fog sword skills, raising one arm while summoning his demonic sword with the other. The move, called Unshakable Roots of a Great Tree, prepared him for the next clash. The Mist assassin advanced, forcing Cyan into a weapon clash that halted his technique midway. This skill level was beyond that of an ordinary member. As the assassin's mask fell to the ground, revealing a face, the assassin praised Cyan for his adeptness. Their weapons still locked, the assassin finally spoke, exclaiming that she couldn't hold back any longer. Cyan's expression turned to surprise as he recognized the assassin. It was Sarika. She had deceived him earlier, hiding her presence to test his true abilities. To make her back away, Cyan unleashed a series of deadly slashes called Thick Fog 8th Form Assault, intensifying the atmosphere. Sarika, with a creepy smile, complimented Cyan's proficiency with the Thick Fog and Fog Sword techniques, expressing even more interest in him. She was about to urge him to show his full potential when Cyan did something unexpected. He ran in the opposite direction. Knowing Sarika's zeal for combat, Cyan understood that her enthusiasm for fighting strong opponents could drive her to dangerous extremes, and he decided it was best to avoid further conflict with the Hallmaster. Sarika, with a crazed expression, dashed from wall to wall in pursuit, shouting for Cyan to come back. She taunted him, saying she was merely giving him what he had sought all along. To stop his escape, she unleashed the fog sword technique, rushing fog storm, slashing until she struck him. Backing away, Cyan acknowledged that while he also enjoyed battling strong opponents, he wasn't as obsessed as Sarika. She continued to tease him, noting that since the realm was created by Eru, no one outside would detect his energy, so he had nothing to worry about. This statement made Cyan reconsider. In this isolated space, he could unleash all his techniques. He knew there was a risk he might kill Sarika, but that no longer concerned him. Summoning his demonic sword, he prepared for battle. Just as he was about to charge, his body betrayed him, and he collapsed face down. Sarika, caught off guard, looked on as an ominous female voice filled the air, saying, "I knew it, you can rest." Sarika's eyes widened as the voice's owner emerged. It was Karam, the demonic sword's true form. Manifested at last, Karam told Sarika she hadn't wanted to intervene but had no choice. Recognizing the demonic sword, Sarika quickly kneeled. Karam demanded an explanation, aware of Sarika's devotion to Eru but baffled by her attack on Cyan. Sarika justified her actions, claiming she was verifying Cyan's claim as the successor. Enraged, Karam released a dark aura, chastising Sarika for not simply summoning her god instead. The tension thickened as Karam suggested Sarika might be challenging her directly. Rather than being intimidated, Sarika scoffed, redirecting attention to Cyan, who was bleeding heavily. Panicking, Karam questioned Cyan's condition. Sarika explained that Karam's full manifestation consumed Cyan's life force. Frustrated, Karam grabbed Cyan's collar, berating him for his weakness despite consuming beast blood. Their interaction was interrupted by Sarika, who declared, "I, Hall Master Sarika Nagrithi of Mist, do not reject any fights," licking her lips and challenging Karam. The previously demure instructor now displayed a perverted eagerness for combat. Karam, feeling unsettled by Sarika's behavior, was momentarily scared. Meanwhile, Cyan regained consciousness and, while steadying himself, asked Karam why she manifested. Ignoring his question, Karam instructed him to stay behind her while she taught Sarika a lesson. Declaring it an honor to face such a longing for a powerful opponent, Karam prepared to battle Sarika. Karam's annoyance grew, and she warned Sarika not to cry and beg for mercy later. Sarika retorted with enthusiasm, saying she would love it if Karam could push her to that point. Just as their fight was about to commence, a commanding voice interrupted them, declaring, "That's enough." A dark blue portal began to materialize, catching Cyan's attention. He recognized it as the portal he had been waiting for. The voice instructed Sarika to send the successor to the altar, which she acknowledged with a bow. Cyan couldn't help but smile awkwardly. He was finally about to meet Eru, the god of darkness. This god, often seen as evil, was known for killing without hesitation and justifying it as an act of consideration, claiming it was what people desired. The god's logic was deemed insane by many, but some believed Eru was merely trying to protect the weak, making him an enigmatic figure. Stepping out of the portal, Cyan found himself before a grand staircase leading to the throne of Eru. The god asked if Cyan knew who he was. Cyan replied confidently, "Of course, the god of black fog, Eru." Eru then inquired if the boy before him was Cyanvert and what evidence he had to claim himself as his successor. Cyan asserted that Eru must have sensed the power of the fog within him. Eru explained there were two ways to become his successor: 1, by receiving the mist stone directly from him, and 2, by the mist stone finding a qualified individual on its own. Since Eru didn't know Cyan, he assumed the latter. Eru confirmed that the mist stone, which had vanished from the altar last year, must have chosen Cyan. He was also surprised that Cyan had awakened Karam, a feat even Eru couldn't accomplish. Noticing the wisdom in Cyan's eyes, Eru deduced that Cyan was from an alternate timeline, not one he was part of. This revelation surprised Cyan, who had thought Eru was involved in bringing him to this timeline. Eru, in a relaxed manner, clarified that if Cyan sought an all-powerful and all-knowing god, he was mistaken. Eru admitted he wasn't powerful, as his divine rights had been stripped away long ago. Cyan acknowledged the truth in Eru's words. Eru remarked on the convenience of Cyan's arrival, as a perfect successor had presented himself, reducing Eru's workload. Cyan jibed at Eru's laziness. Eru then pointed out that Cyan had brought something troublesome with him, referring to an item beneath Cyan's robe. He questioned if Cyan was dissatisfied with the demonic sword, as it appeared Cyan was also seeking the power of the holy sword. Cyan, with a devilish grin, replied that he wasn't attempting anything at the moment. He added that if the world remained unaware of the item's existence, it might become useless. Eru observed that Cyan seemed to indulge in some rather dark interests but chose not to delve deeper into it. He then reminded Cyan that he would adhere to the established rules. As the Supreme Master, Eru inquired, "Dear successor who has inherited my powers, what is your true purpose for wielding this power?" Cyan recalled being asked the same question in his previous life. At that time, he had answered that he wanted to live for his brother. Reflecting now, he recognized how naive and misguided that answer had been. Both Eru and Sarika had seemed indifferent to his past response, leaving him puzzled about their lack of concern. He questioned if there was something he truly desired. Eru advised him to remember that blind faith can be perilous, suggesting that he might have already known about Cyan's eventual downfall back then. Cyan admitted that he had no grand aspirations or divine mission. This time, however, he intended to use Eru's power solely for his personal gain. Eru responded that Cyan would determine what is right or wrong for himself and asked if he was sure he wouldn't regret his decision. He warned Cyan to choose his words carefully, as his answer could have serious repercussions. Cyan, unwavering, stated that he was indifferent to any potential consequences and was determined to forge his own path without following anyone's orders. Eru sensed that Cyan had a particular plan and asked if he would reveal it. Cyan firmly replied, no. Eru noted that, as long as Cyan intended to redeem his name, he was not particularly concerned about the specifics. He found Cyan's demeanor rather uninteresting and chose not to pursue the matter further. Shifting gears, Eru turned his attention to his daughter, Karam. He remarked on how much she had changed, questioning if her newfound obedience was due to her affection for her owner. Flustered, Karam pretended not to understand. Eru expressed his delight at her behavior and leaned in for a kiss, causing Karam to struggle against him. Eru explained that his gesture of affection was because he had nothing else to offer her owner. As Karam fought to escape, she shouted at Cyan, "Crazy bastard. Owner, do something." Cyan, trying to remain detached, commented on their seemingly wholesome father-daughter relationship while watching the scene unfold. As Eru's lips drew closer to Karam's head, a sudden burst of bright light erupted, causing her to panic. In an instant, she was restored to her human form, bewildered by her newfound physicality. Cyan, noticing the absence of his own mana, surmised that Eru must have used his own power for the transformation. Karam, gripping her father's robe tightly, demanded an explanation for the change. Eru casually responded that it was merely a transfer of his own life force. He feigned sadness when Karam expressed her discomfort, adding that a physical body was necessary for her to fulfill her role in serving her owner. His implication about the nature of her service was clear, causing Karam to react with visible discomfort. Karam thought about something dirty. So, Karam, flustered and distressed, pushed against Eru, trying to distance herself from him. Observing their interaction, Cyan couldn't help but note the striking resemblance in their behavior, like father, like daughter. The following morning at the student dorm, Brian approached Cyan with a concerned whisper, inquiring about the recent events. Cyan admitted that he was also unsure and suggested letting it go. However, Brian insisted that the situation couldn't simply be ignored. He was referring to the tense standoff between Sarika and Karam. Karam, visibly irritated, criticized the early visit from an instructor, implying that it might spark gossip about an overly familiar relationship between Sarika and Cyan. Sarika defended herself, asserting that her role was to guide Cyan on the right path and that their relationship was entirely professional. Karam shot back, arguing that a hallmaster should exercise more discretion. The exchange grew heated, with Sarika and Karam glaring at each other like rivals poised for a fight. Sarika countered Karam's claim, stating that her actions were justified and had no bearing on Karam's concerns. In response, Karam insisted that Sarika should stay away from her owner, emphasizing that Cyan only needed her. Sarika, however, maintained that Cyan was her disciple, and her involvement was a matter of duty. Cyan, feeling overwhelmed, decided he needed some fresh air and left the tense atmosphere behind. Brian, anxious and not wanting to be left alone with them, felt his heart race. The other two had started talking about drawing weapons to settle their dispute, and Brian was already fearing for his safety, feeling he was moments away from a panic attack. Once outside, Cyan found solace in the bustling streets below. Standing on a high platform, he surveyed the cityscape, letting out a sigh of relief. But then, a metallic tang in the air caught his attention: blood. Down below, a student lay sprawled on the ground, coughing up blood and clutching his injured arm. A group of bullies loomed over him, eager to inflict more harm. One of them, sneering, conjured an orange ball of energy, taunting the student by calling it a special snack, before attempting to force it into the student's mouth. The student, eyes shut tightly, refused to relent. "Stop!" A voice rang out, cutting through the tension. It was a girl, standing defiantly, her eyes locked on the bullies. She berated them for their actions, accusing them of disgraceful behavior for nobles. The bully in charge, introducing himself with a smug grin as Barrett Lewis Mill, heir to the Duke Lewis Mill of the Garum Kingdom, sneered at her and demanded to know who dared interfere. "I am Erin Severus, Princess of the Ushif Empire," she declared boldly. Barrett laughed derisively, belittling her status as merely the fifth princess. He attempted to intimidate her, leaning in with a mocking greeting, but Erin refused to be cowed, refusing to shake his hand and demanding an explanation for the scene before her. Barrett, feigning innocence, claimed she was mistaken, asking the student to clarify. He yanked the student up by the collar, draping an arm around his shoulders, and inquired if they had been bullying him. The student, eyes downcast, replied weakly that they were just playing around. Erin urged him to speak the truth, seeing his injuries as proof, but he only repeated his words, unwilling to contradict Barrett. "There, you heard it yourself," Barrett said smugly, irritation creeping into his voice. Erin, unconvinced, insisted on taking the student with her, but Barrett grabbed her arm, his expression turning fierce. "You really don't understand, do you?" he hissed. "Lexama's here asked you to leave." Erin warned him to let her go, invoking her royal name, but Barrett dismissed her as a little weak princess. Suddenly, Cyan intervened, his patience at its limit. Hearing Barrett's disdainful words, he delivered a swift kick to Barrett, sending him staggering back. Erin gasped, recognizing Cyan, while Cyan himself was stunned, his eyes fixed on Lexama's, the student from his past, before his regression at Garum Kingdom's Klein Castle. Cyan's mind flashed back to the duel with Lexama's Klein, a woman revered as the continent's greatest swordsman, famed for reaching the pinnacle of swordsmanship without mana. Originally from the Ushif Empire, she had inexplicably joined the Count Klein household in Garum Kingdom after her academy graduation, changing her nationality. Their battle had been intense, her ground-shattering attack almost defeating him, until he outmaneuvered her with a surprise aerial strike, leaving her coughing up blood. Cyan had been tasked by the Empire to assassinate her, but had chosen a direct confrontation out of respect for her unmatched skill. In the present, Lexama's watched Cyan in bewilderment, while Barrett's lackeys scrambled to help their leader. Barrett angrily shoved one aside, his composure shattered. Barrett, curious, asked if he was Cyan Vert, having heard of him and knowing Cyan had served on the front lines. Barrett smirked, inviting Cyan to join their little game. Cyan found the suggestion absurd. He knew that misusing a mana marble could destroy the mana within a person's body. A game where bullies force-feed someone a mana marble? Cyan said, creating a marble in his hand to demonstrate. Barrett's eyes widened in shock at the massive marble Cyan conjured. With a stern look, Cyan challenged them, saying, "Open your mouths." Later, back at the academy, Lexama's received medical treatment. The healers assured her that while most of her external injuries had healed, she needed bed rest for her internal injuries. Erin encouraged her to take it easy. Lexama's blushed, thanking Erin and expressing her gratitude, unsure how she could ever repay them. Erin, a bit boastful, recounted how Barrett and his cronies fled when Cyan intervened. She reassured Lexama's that they only did what was right and that she shouldn't worry. Cyan pondered Lexama's resilience. Despite her fractures and slight concussion, she managed to endure, a testament to her strength as the continent's best swordsman. His thoughts were interrupted when Lexama's asked if they had met before, noticing his intense gaze. Cyan apologized for staring, explaining that she looked familiar, but he must have been mistaken. Lexama's brushed it off, assuring him it was nothing. Erin inquired about Lexama's dorm, worried about possible retaliation. Lexama's replied that she lived in the commoner hall. Erin realized Lexama's was a peasant. Lexama's explained she had been admitted to the academy with instructor Veltane's help, who promised financial support until he was abruptly fired. Cyan concluded that Lexama's was now without support and might have to leave the academy. Erin felt sorry for her. Cyan suggested Eren take Lexamaz under her wing and learn swordsmanship from her. Eren was confused, thinking Lexamaz was a boy, but Cyan clarified that Lexamaz was actually a girl. Eren was taken aback, and Lexamaz explained she hadn't meant to deceive anyone. She found short hair and boys' clothes more comfortable, which led to the misunderstanding. Eren apologized, surprised that Cyan had known all along. Lexamaz assured her it was fine, saying she should be the one apologizing. Eren then asked Lexamaz what she thought of Cyan's idea. Eren explained that under her protection, Lexamaz wouldn't have to worry about bullies and could focus on her studies and training. Lexamaz asked why Eren would choose her. Eren admitted she disliked being alone. Lexamaz expressed her gratitude and promised to make Eren proud. Eren told her it was all Cyan's idea. However, when she turned to thank him, Cyan was gone. Meanwhile, Cyan felt he had done enough and was confident the princess would handle the rest. Now he understood why Lexamaz had left the Ushif Empire. If not for Barrett Lewis Mill, she would never have lost her mana. Lexamaz, the continent's best swordsman who fought without mana, would be a formidable challenge for Cyan in the future. However, Cyan's focus was elsewhere, as he had received an order from Sarika earlier that morning. Excited, he glanced at a piece of paper in his hand. It was his first purification mission as a mist, a challenging task. He recalled Sarika's words of encouragement, knowing they were more of a bluff. He worried things would only get tougher if Sarika was already issuing orders like that. Suddenly, a loud explosion startled Cyan, confirming his suspicion. A demonic beast had infiltrated the academy. The creature, a massive humanoid figure, approached Cyan and asked if he was Cyan. Confused, Cyan inquired how the beast knew him, but the creature replied confidently, citing Cyan's rank, a one-star magic user with an S-rank physique, and the youngest son of the Vert family. The creature introduced himself as Seth Chaharkin, a newcomer like Cyan. Cyan was puzzled that this hulking figure was only 11 years old. Searching his memory, he tried to recall if he had encountered someone like Seth in his previous life. Seth flexed his muscular arms, boasting about Cyan's reputation for defeating demonic beasts and surviving a dragon attack. Seth knew Cyan received an S-rank for his physique, while he himself hadn't. Seth challenged Cyan to a duel. The mark on Seth's chest confirmed the rumors Cyan had heard. The Prince of the Sand, from Sparnia, had indeed enrolled at the academy. Sparnia, a desert nation east of the continent, boasted a powerful military led by a first prince who excelled in both magic and combat. Even the Ushif Empire struggled to conquer it. However, the nation eventually crumbled after the sudden death of its sole successor, reportedly due to illness from focusing too much on physical training at the expense of his health. Cyan hadn't met the prince in his past life, and found it both intriguing and annoying. Remembering what he knew about the prince, Cyan responded to Seth's challenge, asking if they would duel right then and there. Seth eagerly agreed, insisting he wouldn't take no for an answer. Cyan shook his head, refusing the duel. Seth's face paled with shock as he asked why. Cyan explained that duels without permission were against academy rules. He suggested they submit an official request first. Seth agreed and eagerly asked where to do that. Cyan pointed him to the third floor of the main hall. Seth dashed off enthusiastically, promising Cyan he'd be quick. Watching Seth run in the wrong direction, Cyan chuckled, thinking the rumors about the prince's muscle for brains might be true after all. He wasn't even sure if duel requests could be made, but this would keep Seth occupied for a while, allowing Cyan to concentrate on his purification mission. Elsewhere, at a building marked with a serpent banner, Zickerman was briefed by a knight that preparations were complete. Zickerman, known publicly as a generous philanthropist but secretly a slave trader and breeder of rare species, instructed the knight to stop idling and deliver the package to their clients. He reminded them that today marked the unveiling of his greatest creation, demanding special care. Cyan had already scoped out the target and was optimistic about completing the mission swiftly. Karam, sensing something unusual, alerted him to a complex energy emanating from the area. When Cyan asked for clarification, Karam explained that the target was concealing something strange. In a dimly lit prison cell, Zickerman watched a woman, remarking that she had finally calmed down. He referred to her as his cash cow and advised her to rest. Suddenly, a red mist enveloped the room, slicing through a knight's neck in an instant. Stunned, Zickerman ordered the remaining knight to find the intruder. Cyan sprang into action, swiftly attacking the knight. His dagger slashed the knight's arm, causing him to drop his weapon. With precise movements, Cyan targeted the knight's legs, immobilizing him before pressing his dagger to the knight's throat. The knight cursed as Cyan ended his life with a quick slash. Panic-stricken, Zickerman wondered where his other guards were. Cyan taunted him, assuring Zickerman he would soon join them in death. As Zickerman stammered, Offering Cyan vast sums of money in exchange for his life, Cyan coldly severed his hand, drawing a scream of agony. Calmly, Cyan recited Zickerman's crimes, conducting inhumane experiments, breeding illegal species, and managing the slave market, all deserving of death. He gave Zickerman a minute to repent before his pain would be ended. Realizing his fate, Zickerman pleaded, claiming he was just meeting a demand for slaves and blaming the buyers for any wrongdoing. Cyan expected his lack of remorse and informed him that time was up. With swift, precise movements, Cyan executed a series of deadly slashes, ending Zickerman's life and completing the purification mission. Before leaving, Cyan decided to explore the premises. He stopped at a particular cell, where Karam sensed a blend of two distinct energies. Curious, Cyan sliced through the bars and was taken aback by what he saw, a woman who appeared lifeless. Initially dismissing her as unimportant, Karam pointed out the object she held, a dragon egg. A few moments later, Cyan brought a gleaming purple dragon egg, contemplating the implications of his unexpected find. And with that, we must conclude for today. If you enjoyed this part and want to see what happens next, please like and subscribe. Thank you.